Kingsfoil
Yep.
is a weed.
This is
Aragorn.
a very good point you're making.
Think about Aragorn. Now, this is so good. Kingsfoil being a weed is similar to Aragorn himself. A plant with healing medicine named after kings is now known only as a weed to modern folk and grows sparsely in the north. Anyways, it's kind of a bit of a metaphor for Aragorn himself or for the lineage of kings. It's been lost, right?
Welcome back to all of our supporters across multiple things that I won't name anymore because there's too many. Thank you for supporting our podcast. We really appreciate you. We're going to talk about Lord of the Rings again.
We are. I hope you guys are enjoying these.
Yeah, I hope so too, because this is going to be really freaking long.
It really is. I am doing my best. I am being concise in my notes.
We left off with the terrible wizard fight between Gandalf and Saruman.
Yes. The first regrettable moment of this whole
I
series.
think it's the first moment in the movie where, and I didn't really mention this last time, maybe I should now. I have come to the conclusion over the years that I'm actually not a big fan of Peter Jackson as a director.
Well, that'll be relevant for this episode of the show then. That's
Despite how good these movies are and how much I love them.
I think
and particularly
you're probably right.
this one, I'm not a fan of his directorial style. I think that what made Lord of the Rings special was almost in spite of some of his tendencies as a director.
Yeah.
It's a lot of Weta Digital's work and a lot of the work that went into certainly Howard Shore's score.
Yeah, and Philippa Boyens and Fran Walsh and the script, the screenwriting,
the writing.
Right. That he did part of that too.
But I have actually never liked the way he shoots action at all.
No, I have one movie he's done that I think was, and it's King Kong.
Oh, King Kong's
the action
decent,
between the gorilla and the T-Rex fighting,
fights,
that was something else.
I haven't actually watched that in a long time, so I might revisit that just to check myself on that. But at least as far as these movies go, as far as the Hobbit movies that come after this, there is almost a ramping of his confidence to do as much crazy absurd action as he can. And so it's real subtle and mild, but you can sort of see the seeds of it. And then it just gets more and more and more and more over the top and absurd as the movies go on. Yes. So here's kind of what I mean. Like, we talked about how silly it looks, this wizard fight, back and forth, right? Not a big fan of it, but it's not the end of the world. It's not horrible. It's just kind of silly.
Yeah.
Then, you get to the scene we're going to talk to, and I'll go into more in depth on it with the top of Weathertop.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll get to that in a minute. And then you get, Legolas when the troll whips the chain around it, and he sort of pins it, and then runs up the chain and fires into his head. Yeah. That is, I think...
It's acceptable.
Cool enough, but, not crazy enough to be just ridiculous. Okay, I can buy that. He's an elf. They have light feet. He can walk on this little tightrope chain. Yeah. Cool. I've seen something relatively similar to that in circuses or something like that. Right. That's technically possible, I guess. Yeah. But then you got the rock or the bridge, the stairs, I should say, that collapse and lean forward. And it's just kind of okay, that's really crazy. And then in the next movie, he's skateboarding downstairs and shooting 3 arrows at a time into people's faces.
Yeah.
And then in the next movie...
He's leveling up, dude. He's just leveling up. Haven't you played the game? Haven't you played Return of the King for the GameCube, where he shoots 2 arrows in different directions, each shot, and they're glowing? Once you level 20, anyways, that's what happened. Now the real difficulty with that is with the Hobbit, explaining how he gets better in the Hobbit. Yeah.
So the only fun, at that point he skates down his trunk and lands, and it's all done for a gag so that Gimli can go, that only counts as one. But the whole visual of it gets to a point of insanity to where I stop kind of buying it anymore. But that's not even. But wait, there's more. Then we get into The Hobbit, where the first movie I actually kind of like.
It's pretty good, actually. I don't mind the first one.
I'm not I'm not a hater of what is it? The Unexpected Journey.
Oh yeah,
the first Hobbit film. That should have been one movie, not 3. I would have said 2 is acceptable, but even that I think is too much.
And 3 just being basically like chapter 16.
Yes.
And just that, or 17, is like ridiculous.
It's stupid.
It's unbelievable.
And so I checked out after watching the second movie in theaters. I was like, I'm done with this. Yeah. And it was the barrel scene in particular that did it for me. That was when I was like, okay, I'm fetching done, dude. I can't with this action. It's stupid at this point.
Yeah.
It's just stupid now.
It's
used not to cool. It's not fun. Yeah. It's just stupid to me.
So there's a few things that make you kind of smile and think like, oh, that's cool. Legolas getting on top of the horse in the Two Towers when he's like, he shoots his arrows. Like, that's fine. It's acceptable. Sure. Like, it's ridiculous, but he's an elf. It's acceptable. Okay, fine. Like, there were certain things that were just acceptable. But basically, from Helm's Deep till the end of the third Hobbit movie, Peter Jackson is like, we're going to dip our toes into the unacceptable waters and see what people think. And it kind of became a joke of like, ooh, what's Legolas going to do this time? And and Peter Jackson was glad to just continue that.
Yes.
Okay.
So I checked out at that point, right? Okay. Even though I think some of the action at the end of the movie with Smaug even is just absurd. But
it was the black arrow and on his son's shoulder, and
yeah, it's just crazy.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Even like the dwarves, like going through and Smaug's chasing him around.
The Home Alone scene,
yes,
where they got their booby traps.
Yes. It's just, dude, it's so dumb.
It's got Macaulay Culkin,
and so I was like, okay, I'm done. But it was the barrel scene in particular that really did it for me. And then I've only seen snippets of how stupid it gets in the third
one,
where that bridge is collapsing and there's falling stones, and the elf is Legolas literally like projecting himself up falling stones as the bridge is collapsing.
But elves are light-footed, so he's not pushing the stones down.
It's just stupid.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
So my whole point is,
you start to see glimpses of it here.
There are little tiny small seeds of that in his directorial style in this movie.
You know what
it's the parts of the movie I like the least.
Okay. It's the demon on his left shoulder is what it is. So the demon on his left shoulder directed a couple parts of this movie, but becomes more prominent as he feeds it more and more.
He feeds it more and more and more.
Yeah. Okay.
So I also want to give this caveat with giving that criticism. Obviously, this is my just personal feeling about it. I do think that I tend to take movies and stories more seriously than almost everyone on earth does. I think there's probably a certain sentiment that people want to go to the movies to have fun.
Right.
And that these moments tend to be fun for the audience.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that like these are horrible choices or that they weren't mostly enjoyed or that it's a bad thing to do some really silly things.
Right, or to enjoy it.
To have fun in the action. I think Marvel movies in particular tend to kind of play on that, and they're just fun. You're not supposed to be there taking it super seriously, but I just tend to like to take stories seriously. So it doesn't jive with like what I enjoy when I go to, analyze a film or whatever. So it's just a directorial style that I'm not a fan of, but it doesn't mean it's bad. So just want to make that real quick note. But it will be the reason for some of my criticisms today. Okay, so
all right,
we are going to go into Shortcut to Mushrooms.
Yep.
That's where we left off. So Frodo and Sam walking along a country lane.
I guess Frodo took a turn too quick, and Sam, didn't know where he went.
I said, "Oh, Mr. Frodo, where are you?"
Frodo, we're still in the Shire. What could possibly go wrong?
Yep. And this is a plant, I think, for the fact that Sam is going to be there with him, carrying him up the mountain at the end. He's never going to leave Frodo's side, except for the one moment, and then he curses himself for being so stupid. But
you old fool, Samwise.
Anyway, it's all kind of a setup for that. But I told Mr. Gandalf, I wouldn't leave you. So I thought I'd lost you.
Yeah,
Frodo looks. What are you talking about? Something Gandalf said. He said, "Don't you leave him, Samwise Gamgee." And I don't mean to. It's also a setup for the end of the movie.
Yeah,
that particular line.
Yeah, that line.
I don't mean to, which is beautiful. It's one of my favorite moments of the film. Right at the end, where they're on the boat together, the little canoe thing.
There's a line. I think it's towards the end of The Hobbit, but it's where Gandalf talks about how much that he just loves simple folk, just the plain simple folk, and Sam is that.
Yes.
That's who he is. And it's so funny to think that for Frodo, the adventure doesn't start until a certain point, until they're closer to Bree or until there's danger or whatever. Because Frodo's more adventurous just in general. He grew up, his uncle's Bilbo, whatever. Yeah. Sam isn't like that. For Sam, the adventure started a while ago.
Oh, yeah.
And this whole thing's been a crazy adventure for him. And so he's taken it very seriously. And for him, who has never set one more foot out of the Shire, right, his whole life, he's already on the wildest ride of his life, right? So he's way more concerned about what's happening than Frodo is, who's like, oh, this is nothing. Like my uncle went all the way across the mountains, like this is nothing. But for Sam, if you see it through his perspective, you can really get kind of where he's coming from.
Yeah, well, in the book, they have the scene where they meet the elves, right, which is much longer than it is in the extended version of Fellowship, where they're kind of just watching them from a distance as they're singing their song and
that
kind of walking through the woods.
Beautiful.
Yeah, in the book, they actually spend the night with them, and but Sam is just the whole time just like, oh,
I can't believe it, the elves, the elves.
This is the whole reason he came. I want to see elves so bad. And he's just like gobsmacked the whole time. He's like, oh, frick, dude.
That's crazy.
So, yeah,
I love it.
You're making a very good point.
Yeah, whereas Frodo, like Bilbo constantly had dwarves and maybe not so much elves, but he was known to the elves. Yeah. And there were constantly foreigners coming to Frodo's house because of Bilbo. Yeah. Sam never had such a pleasure, right?
No, his dad wouldn't have liked that anyways.
Nope. So then we get a really good re-intro to Merry and Pippin, right, where they just kind of run into him. And it's so funny because Farmer Maggot, the way he's described by Tom Bombadil and the way he's referred to in the books, he's not like a bad dude.
He's like a super good dude.
Yeah. But, sometimes these darn kids stealing his fruits and vegetables,
it's the perspective of a child.
Yes, exactly.
Who was scared of Farmer Maggot. That was his impression of him.
Yeah.
But that impression is a skewed one, obviously, by the fact that he had felt guilty for stealing mushrooms and he had been chased off by the dogs. Right. And so he saw him as Frodo. I'm speaking of Frodo here.
Frodo, yeah.
They explain this a lot more in the book.
Yeah, it's very fun.
Go ahead.
Well, you kind of see that perspective here, where it's like, get out of my fields, get out of my fields. Yeah. And this guy holding up this sickle, scythe. Like, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. Like, that's how kids feel about adults. Yes. That's how scary adults are to kids.
Crap, he's coming.
Oh, he's mad.
So, yeah, I mean, they sort of pay homage to this concept here, where Merry and Pippin were the ones stealing the mushrooms, and he's chasing them out, and they're like, oh, run away. And they kind of just skip past. They've done a lot of skipping, and there's a lot more skipping going to happen. They're just kind of just nodding towards a bunch of things that happen during these parts and just like basically cutting them out.
And even calling this a shortcut to mushrooms, that's a chapter that they cut from this film. Yeah, they do not have that whole chapter in, but they kept the words in so that,
Yeah, there's just a lot of cutting going on here, but I do like that they at least, like I said, tip the cap towards those references.
Yeah.
Farmer Maggot. We're not going to see Farmer Maggot in the movie, but there he is. The elves, there they are. They're walking towards the havens. Things like that.
Yeah.
They don't really nod towards Bombadil. They just leave him completely alone. But I think that was for the better for the film, for the purposes of the film. But anyways, they roll down the side of this hill, running away. And they
mushrooms. This is where
more mushrooms. Oh no, they weren't stealing mushrooms. They were stealing carrots.
Other things, and then those cabbages from the week before.
Yeah,
and it was a bunch of stuff.
Other things, and then they find mushrooms when they fall down. That's why it's called shortcut.
A shortcut to mushrooms. Right. Whereas the real shortcut to mushrooms was Farmer Maggot gives Frodo a basket of mushrooms.
Yes,
like here you go.
Yes.
Like that was the shortcut to mushrooms in the book. In the movies, it's quite different.
And then he actually gives them a ride to the ferry,
which is where they're about to go,
where they meet up with Merry at that point.
And this is the part now we're at the part where they first see the first Nazgul.
The first Nazgul, yeah. And I was actually kind of surprised how faithful this was to the description of the encounter in the book.
I guess,
It describes a hollow where they go inside.
Under a tree.
And it calls, the ring is sort of calling to him. He takes it out of his, underneath
and it's
his
Sam
shirt.
who kind of
who
helps him out.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of that. Obviously, Merry wasn't there. Pippin was in the book.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Merry was not, but a lot of this was described similarly. And there's some cool camera tricks they use here that I really like.
Yeah.
Again, I always forget the term, but it's where you either dolly in and zoom your lens out,
Yeah.
or you dolly out and zoom your lens in.
It depends on if you're expanding space or compressing space.
Yes, and and that's exactly what you use it for.
Yeah.
I remember in a film class I took in college, they were describing the use of this in particular shots. They use it to really good effect. What's the director's name?
Oh, you're talking about the older director, Vertigo?
No, not him.
Oh, okay.
It's the movie where she goes into the little safe room. What is that?
Oh,
movie
Panic
called?
Room
Panic Room.
with Jared Leto.
Yes. But the director, he's super famous.
Who
he
made
did he
that?
did Fight Club, I think.
Were you Darren Aronofsky, or
No, he didn't do that. He was-
Sorry, I'm blanking now.
what's his fetching name?
David Fincher.
David
You're right.
Fincher.
It is. Yeah, Fincher. Yeah,
Yes.
he's Fight Club. Yeah.
David Fincher directed Panic Room, and he is particularly picky with shot selection.
Okay,
He'll redo. He's notorious for redoing over.
Peter Jackson is
and
too.
he is too.
Yeah.
But more for like, I want you to deliver it in this very specific way.
Yes, yeah.
Versus, I want the camera move to be like exactly perfect.
Okay.
But the reason that this type of shot is used to such good effect in the opposite direction, because in this shot in Fellowship they're compressing the space, so the space is getting tighter.
Yep.
Around them,
it's harder to breathe.
compressing in
It's
around
claustrophobic,
them
yeah.
as the rider is approaching.
Yeah.
In Panic Room, she has claustrophobia, and the movie
Yes.
is she goes into a panic room and during a home invasion,
right.
and she feels claustrophobic, and it's like a super intense situation.
Yeah.
But she sort of overcomes some of this fear, and they use it the opposite way. They expand
that's
space
cool. That's cool.
at the end of the movie as she is sort of like relieved from this experience or whatever. So that's its purpose generally, is to, like you said, make it like, oh no, everything's coming in on top of me, or whoa, we're widening it up. It's like, I think they use it in 2001.
Oh, really?
To an effect like that, where it's like, I
can't remember.
like it's all trippy and
Yeah,
space is
yeah.
like going crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd have to go back and recheck that. But so they use that shot. It's like, get off the road. They go jump underneath. And there's a tree in the frame where you can see just on the edge of the frame, a little bit behind the tree, right?
Yeah.
And you see nothing enter from off the frame. It's from, so there, how do I explain this? From this side of the tree, the ring wraith just enters the scene, but you don't see him walk from the space that he clearly should have from that little space on the right side of the frame.
Yeah.
So they did a mask there, obviously.
I was gonna say,
and
yeah.
had him just sort of appear there, which makes it, and he's huge. It's
It's really big. Yeah.
trippy. So the camera work here is really pretty phenomenal. In the way that they increase the tension around these wraiths. And I remember the effect that it had on me. Like I would just in school doodle ring wraiths like all freaking day.
Yeah.
Because they were so
and the
scary.
horses.
They were so menacing and intense.
and mysterious.
Yeah. And these pairs of shots together in sequence, I think really is a great introduction to their first appearance on screen in the film. Well, wait, no, this might not be the first.
technically saw
You
them
technically
right
saw
out.
them cutting that guy. Because Gandalf is
right.
describing
That's
that they're
right.
coming, and he like rides up and like cuts that guy's head off or
That's
whatever.
right, yeah.
And there's the guys like, oh, they're all incompetent.
Yep.
And they're all
That's
super
right.
afraid. Now, there is a slight difference to how they're described in the book, where they're scary, but they're more just like really creepy.
Yeah.
They're not like this horrible, menacing, like immediate, like, oh my gosh, like run away right now, these things are coming.
Right.
And a lot of the
They'll
hobbits
talk to people.
Yeah.
They'll like get information. Yeah.
and the hobbits will talk back to him like, get the fetch out of here, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you're bothering me. Go away, you're weird.
And they don't have a huge grasp on
Yeah.
on the material world, right?
Yeah.
They live in this like spiritual world. They
They're
only
in
see
between kind of
they see like the shades of the material world.
Yeah.
But they can't really be around the sun very much. They can only see like in the dark, right? In the shadows. That's where they interact, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's this whole interesting like spirit world kind of thing that's happening.
I think that both are very effective, kind of for different reasons. So I'm not like knocking the way that they're portrayed in the film necessarily.
This one's better for a movie, I think. It's more visual, it's more stark.
Yeah. But one aspect about it that I liked better in the book that I think links up to my favorite thing about Tolkien's work in general, which is where your introduction to it, whether it's The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings as novels, puts you in the perspective of hobbits who have no clue what any of these things are and are just totally freaking blind and oblivious to the danger surrounding them.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? They don't come across as they're described in the book as being something that's like, okay, that's weird and I want to stay away from it. And then the elves warn you, but they don't tell you why.
They don't.
They don't bother like really getting into the details.
Yep.
But they're like, just trust me. Like, you probably should. You should definitely not. You should not talk to them, no matter what.
Elves are famous for that.
But even in the scene where they get on the ferry and they're going across, they're kind of just looking across, like, oh my gosh, what's that? And it's just like a wraith, like sniffing the ground.
Yeah,
they
that's
get
right.
off their horses and they sniff the ground and they crawl towards them. And it's like, that is like creepy, but like, what is that? They're not like in a fight or flight mode necessarily scared, right?
Right.
So I liked that because from their perspective, they just have no fetching clue the kind of danger they're in. And then you learn by reading additional material that Tolkien published or that his son published afterwards, and you go, and you reread it and you have more of a Gandalf perspective on the story where like, run right now, get away from that thing. So for that reason, I kind of like them not being this horribly menacing, scary thing you run away. Yeah. But they're still really cool in the movie version too, right? Love the cinematography for making them look as large as they are, as menacing as they are. The sound design is great for like all the insects crawling around.
Oh my gosh, that is it's hard to watch even still. I'm like, even as Frodo, it's like as soon as Peter Jackson's like, all right, now an 8-legged arachnid is going to crawl over your legs here, and I've got a little worm here. It's going to go right over your shoulder, and you're just gonna not move, all right? No, thank you. I'm going to not be okay with that.
They made him do a lot of things that were
like crawling through the marshes and all that.
Yeah, and
that would
like,
not have been easy as an actor.
Well, like what's his name? Sam's actor, Sean Astin. He like ran into the water, right? But his foot got cut on the sharp rocks.
Yeah, that's right.
He had to go to the hospital.
And Peter Jackson wanted Aragorn to kick that helmet in the two towers.
Broke his foot.
Broke his freaking foot. And like, okay.
Sean Bean refused to go in a helicopter, so he climbed the whole mountain with his costume on.
Yeah. Pretty beastly.
There's just like a lot of things that happen in this film that are like not safe at all.
No, but that's part of because he wasn't a big known director. Yeah. This movie kind of went under the radar a little bit at first.
Yeah.
But I love that Sam is the one who helps Frodo resist the ring in that scene.
Yeah.
He's the one who helps Frodo to remember his purpose. Frodo was under immense pressure to forget and to use the power of the ring to escape the situation, right? And Sam helps to bring him back, right, to remember. Yeah. But those mushrooms is it Pippin or Mary that throws the mushrooms?
Throws them. They make so much more noise when he throws it than when they land.
And it was right next to the thing.
This is a sound design criticism I have.
Yeah.
Because again, it kind of goes with what I'm going to say about Weathertop later. It's almost like they're more concerned about conveying a feeling about what the characters are feeling than they are about conveying necessarily a realistic sense of sound and space and like action. And this is part of my disagreement of the directorial style. So while they are there, cowering, trying to be quiet, they're breathing really loudly.
Because that helps the audience to feel.
Because it makes you feel. And that's why they do it in anime all the time. They're always grunting and making noise like, right?
Right.
Like it's just meant to convey their inner terror.
Yeah.
Right. But like, if you're making sounds like that, it's just freaking pathetic. Like, and so like, similarly, I feel like that's kind of what they're doing with the noises. There's all everything makes a loud noise. Even him reaching and like grabbing the ring and the chain makes a noise.
And there's a ringing.
And when Sam grabs him, it makes a loud noise. And like everything's loud. And
that's
so
true.
he it's almost like he stands up, which makes rustling noise in the brush. He
throws the thing,
whips his arm, which makes a noise, throws the thing, which makes it's like
he's right next to it.
Literally like inches away from you. He could hear all of that.
and he didn't throw it that far. Like if you see how far, it's like
it's like 20,
20 feet,
generously
30 feet?
20 feet.
Yeah.
Maybe more like 10 or 15.
Yeah, it did not go that far. And it's like, okay, you can't get out of this situation,
Yeah.
you guys. Like, this isn't as easy as it looks.
Yeah.
But another thing, those horses, the way it shows the horse foot with like nails in it, and it's
nails
like
in it.
bleeding and
Yeah,
like
that's intense.
Oh, it's gnarly.
Because he
It is
looks,
gnarly.
I love that shot too, because he looks up through like a little hole in the
Yeah, the
gnarls of
roots.
the root.
Yeah.
And you see his eye through it. That's just a great shot.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of great shots that they chose.
Yeah.
This is something I was really paying attention to recently when I was watching Better Call Saul, the series.
Oh, yeah.
When we were, doing more filmmaking on our Dark Pixel channel, we were sort of rushing through these projects and trying to like get them done in like a week's time or whatever.
Yes.
And so it was one
Mario-
aspect of
Spider-Man
our
and
work.
everything.
Even on some of the projects that took longer, say like
Yeah.
Imaginary Warzone, the longer
Yeah.
series we did. One of the things that I look back on and I wish I had spent more time on in that series is shot selection, cinematography,
Oh, yeah.
picking angles that help tell the story.
Right.
But like they pick really, really cool angles in all of this. And all of it
Yeah.
contributes to kind of like what they're feeling. And so you just have that frame through like the hole in the root, right? And it's just his eye just lines up like directly with that. And it's just a
Yeah.
really cool shot.
That was a good shot.
The cinematography across all three movies, but I think in particular this one is just really, really brilliant in that sense.
Yeah, Andrew Lesnie. I think.
He did a phenomenal job
Very
for
good.
this film. Phenomenal job.
And the Nazgul, the screeches, the way that they screech,
The scream, yeah.
it is a bone chilling.
Yeah.
Like that is something that would cause fear immediately.
Yeah.
Very, very good. And they get creepier as the movie progresses, especially by the Two Towers when they're screaming like it's like magnified, it's like louder,
Yeah.
and the way it trails off in the end, and that high pitched screech.
Yep.
Oh, it's just really, really good.
Good stuff.
So, anyways, they get chased through the Buckleberry Ferry, which
Buckleberry
is
Ferry,
wonderful.
follow me.
The scene's really good. The way the horse's hooves skid to a stop
Yeah.
on the dock
On
as
the
they
dock.
run along it.
It's totally dope.
Really, really cool.
Yeah. I love that shot too. This is actually on the first edition of the book that I bought. So it was one that was obviously after the movie had come out.
Yeah.
But it's the image of the ring wraith on the hill.
Yeah.
And he's silhouetted by like a
remember
strong backlight. That's actually described in the book.
Yes, I
When they
remember.
go down into that dell, they decide to leave
And
the
they look
road
up. Yeah.
and they go down like into this heavy brush.
Yeah,
And they look
like
up behind
thorns.
them. I think it's actually daytime, but they just see
Yeah.
this black silhouetted shape on the top of the hill where they just were.
Yeah.
And it's basically that image, but it's a nighttime shot. So there's this hard like moonlight
Moon,
sort of
yeah.
streaming low
It's always a full
behind
moon.
them.
Yeah.
But it's that image is on the cover of the first version of the book that I read.
Cool, nice.
And so I would always trace that and like draw that
yes,
image.
nice.
But yeah, a lot of really cool shots. They get chased. Mary picks up that there's something deeper going on here and decides to help them out. Yeah.
And then we skip 4 freaking chapters. I just
You
can't believe
go,
it. And
they
now we're in
skip
Bree.
way ahead
Yeah.
to when they get to Bree. Yeah.
Way
I mean,
ahead.
they skip so much stuff. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, that's great.
The one thing that I know it's impossible. The movie's already 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
But I just, of all the stuff they skipped, which I mostly agree with, I just wish the Borrowites had somehow found a way to get in there. Because, and I know it's not necessarily relevant. It doesn't help the story for it to be there.
It wouldn't, other than to explain where they
just-
get their swords. Because
Yes.
when Aragorn just like gives them swords, he's like, "Oh, by the way, I've been carrying these for 13 days. Maybe it's a good time to give you them now. I've got all these swords in my belt. just been lugging
I didn't
them
even
around.
think about that. That's true. He's just got random swords carrying around.
Here you go. That's awkward. It's awkward.
Well, not
right?
even random swords, random like hobbit-sized swords.
Yeah, these little
Like
hobbit
knives,
swords.
yeah.
Yeah, knives and daggers and things. So it's awkward. This would have helped to explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
But how would they get out? I guess I don't know. They could have
Because
figured it out.
Bombadil's the one that saves them, so you
Exactly.
can't really do that. But
Well, yeah, but then he just figured something else out. He
Yeah.
became ingenious. But
the Borrowites are even freakier than the
they
Wraiths.
are, and maybe
Yeah.
that's an argument for not including them.
That's
right?
a good
because
point.
you
That's
don't.
a good point.
They don't show up again.
Yeah, they don't.
We're stuck with wraiths. That's the whole rest of this book.
You
You
just
know?
convinced me. It would have been a bad idea to include them.
It would have been too creepy.
Yeah, again, almost every time I encounter cuts they made, it's like, yeah, it was the right choice. Like,
Yeah,
there's
I'm
really
becoming
no
more that way.
arguing for it.
Yeah.
There's no way to work Tom Bombadil into this movie in a way that works because you never see the fetching guy again.
Exactly.
You never see him again.
It's the most.
He's not involved at all.
It's weird to think of because, you know, like you're writing a book, right? You're trying to make sure everything's perfect. You don't want a single chapter that's out of place. You don't want your book to drag on too much. You don't want to. And then the most popular of the genre you're writing in ever in all time spends like 4 chapters that Peter Jackson is like totally fine with just getting rid of because
cut that out.
and it's like, what? And so like this word, I need the right word. Otherwise the book won't be good. And then it's like Tolkien, it seemed to have not really cared about that much, which is kind of crazy.
And maybe that's kind of what people are getting at when they talked about not loving his writing, maybe because it gets a little tangenty in this sense, but
yes, sometimes
it's still really well written.
Unbelievably well written.
Yeah.
And I think he was still very selective in his word choice. He wanted Tom Bombadil in his story, and no one cares about Tom Bombadil. Okay, people care about who is Tom Bombadil and all that, but for the most part, people are like, you can skip those, right?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I'm just saying people,
I don't think
people
you should.
do.
I don't think you should.
You
Other
should
people
not
say
skip
that.
them. Goldberry and all that. It's wonderful. I think it's wonderful. But I think the first time or two I read it, I was like, this is a freaking slog, right?
Yeah.
But this is also the best-selling like fantasy book of all time. So I don't know how.
One of the best-selling books of all time, period.
Yes,
not
period.
even just fantasy books.
Yes, absolutely. So crazy stuff. Anyways, Barthelme and Butterbur is classic, perfect casting, perfect everything.
They did great.
The only difference here with the books is that Merry does not join the party. He's not a party animal in the book the way that they really play him up to be in the movies.
I think Merry and Pippin both were sort of taken to another level as comic relief foil characters. They're not portrayed really exactly how they were in the books.
Right.
All of them felt a lot more mature in the books than they
very
are in the
much so,
movies.
especially Pippin, right? Because like there's a few times where it's like, oh, Pippin, that silly Pippin shouldn't have done that, right? But in the movies, it's like everything he does is silly
He's
beyond
really
belief,
dumb.
full of a toque, full of a toque. Like
even-
every 2 minutes, it's like, you idiot, you're so stupid.
The line that gets a laugh from everybody who watches it, but which I've always kind of been like, I don't love that line. Is
where are we going?
Where are we going? He hadn't been paying attention whatsoever. Anyway.
Classic.
But Butterbur, you were talking about.
It's just, I think Butterbur's great because you get that kind of like sort of forgetfulness, but also what's really good about Brie is they use a lot of those really strange camera angles, like wide angles to people's faces. They make everyone look really strange, and people are drinking beer, just like dripping down their beard and burping. This guy's got like a little
That was
mouse
Peter Jackson.
pet. Oh, that was him?
Yeah, he's the guy who like belches in the streets
Jeez,
when it's raining.
Oh, that's right.
That's his
right,
cameo in this one. Yeah.
And then they do a really good job of, like, these hobbits are children, right?
Yeah.
Like, not really, but they seem to be. They're being portrayed as children in this big world of the big folk, right? And the big folk are just, they're dirty and they're loud. But Merry and Pippin are all for it, but it seems creepy. Like, it's a scary place to be a little hobbit amongst these bigger folk.
This is probably,
and they do a great job of conveying that.
It's probably a good time to bring up the color grading in this film as being one of the first films that actually used digital color grading. Was it the first or one of?
I heard
maybe
the first
The Matrix was but
no, the first was that one. The Oh Brother Where Art Thou? Oh Brother Where Art Thou was the first.
Was The Matrix not digitally?
I think The Matrix was. When did Brother Where Art Thou come from?
I thought Brother Where Art Thou was like a 2000 or 2000s movie, but was it a 19?
It might have been 99.
Movie?
It might have been 99. Yeah, Oh Brother Where Art Thou was the very first one, so it must have been. Unless
The Matrix wasn't color graded
in 99.
digitally.
Gosh,
but I wouldn't.
It has such a consistent color profile.
I wouldn't imagine that it wasn't.
Yeah, me neither.
But anyway, this is one of the first films that was digitally color graded.
One of the first. This says 2000. Yeah, weird. So I guess The Matrix wasn't.
It must not have been
digitally graded.
They
did a great job with that.
Matching it. Yeah,
given that's the case.
Anyway, there's a pretty heavy green tint on a lot of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes, I've noticed.
But it's like in particular in some of these scenes where I think it's really effective because it's sort of that sickly kind of just like
feel that way.
Like you're saying, that tone or that feeling where it's like, oh, something's wrong with this place, you know? And what's unfortunate is that in the Blu-ray releases, they go back and they change the color grades to the more
Michael Bay.
Yeah, well,
right?
it's the more conventional film look, which is skin tones or highlights are pushed towards warmer orange tones.
Keep everything accurate to skin
yeah,
color.
and then the mid tones are pushed towards the cooler blue tone.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so that's kind of become the conventional look. And typically when you're color grading, you want the colors to look natural. And that's what you'd want to do. You want to make sure your skin tones are in the right range for natural skin tones. So that's like the general rule, but you break those rules for the purpose of a tone that you want to create in the scene. So as time went on, you started to see films do really, really harsh colors. Like, I don't remember which Bond movie it was where they go into like this really high-end sort of club or something. It's just so orange. Like everything is just like orange as freaking balls.
I was wondering if that's Quantum of Solace.
I think it was the one after that.
I don't know if I saw that one.
Skyfall.
Skyfall. Oh, it could have been
something
Skyfall.
like that.
That's right. No, I think you're right. I think it was Skyfall. Yeah.
But anyway, I really prefer when this movie had that sort of greenish hue to a lot of it. They tried to fix it in some of the releases after this, and it really changes the whole feel of these scenes. I mean, color grading is another tool, and this is kind of an argument that I've made going back to my first review of Xenogears, where I was talking about some of the misplacement I felt of music in the game.
Right.
And it's like this music just doesn't fit this scene at all.
Right.
And people were arguing with me about that. They loved those music choices. And part of my construction of my responses to that was, listen, man, like the song on its own is fine. It's a great piece, but that's not its purpose. In a film, in this collaborative medium, you're using each one of these aspects to tell a story. They're each a tool for the director to use to convey what they're trying to make you feel in that moment. And color grading is a big part of it. So you can change the whole feel even if the music's the same, the acting is the same, the shot selection's the same, and you just color it differently.
Yeah.
It's like it gives it a different feel. It can totally change that. And so anyway, I don't know if in the most recent release of the films they have sort of taken it back to how it was supposed to be or not.
I doubt that.
But I watched it on a streaming service like HBO, and it seemed to be more correct.
Interesting.
Than the Blu-ray release, which totally like screwed it up. You can look this up. Just do like a search, Lord of the Rings color grade comparison or something like that. And you'll see the first Blu-ray release where they tried to fix the color grade of the film. It's just garbage. It's horrible. But it is very green tinted, and that tended to be not what you wanted, or what became not conventional for digital color grading later on.
Yeah. Like this was the original.
Yes.
This was the color.
It's so much better. But that's not like a natural skin tone. That would not give you your orange checker lines.
But it's saying something.
Yes.
Though, and that's the reason why. It's telling you something.
Yeah, it was.
But you're right. The Blu-ray and then the 4K is different. It does look like the 4K they took it back.
Yes,
to
it feels like that's what
I think
did.
you're right. Oh, that's wild.
Because people complained a lot. But anyway, I part of the magic, the lightning in the bottle, success of the Fellowship of the Ring and of this trilogy, I feel, kind of this was part of it because this was like again sort of a pioneering tool that had not been used a lot, and which sort of showed people the potential of digital color grading on how to use it to tell your story. And the original release of the film was really, really well graded, I felt, in that sense. And this scene is a great example of that. Just the way it gives off that feeling you're talking about. Like, oh man, something is off in this place. I don't trust any of these big people. Oh, everyone's looking at me weird. Oh, that guy Strider sitting in the corner, like puffing on his pipe, just lights up his eyes just a little bit. Another great shot, by the way.
Yes,
it's just
really
on his
good.
eyes as just that light, just like
it's so subtle,
just barely sort of illuminates his eyes. All of it comes together to create this like kind of perfect feeling, right? Because they're waiting for Gandalf. They don't know what to do now. Like Gandalf was supposed to meet us at this point, and he's not back. And like I don't know where to go from here. He was supposed to meet us here. And they asked Butterbur, like, have you heard from Gandalf? Oh, elderly chap, big pointy hat.
Yeah, not seen him for 6
Haven't
months.
seen him in 6 months.
Yeah.
It's like, what do we do now then, right? So they're kind of waiting on that. And this is where Pippin starts saying too much because he was supposed to go by the name Underhill, not use his name Baggins.
But get a few drinks and Pippin,
starts saying, "Oh,
Pippin's
Frodo
stupid."
Baggins.
Apparently,
he's right over there.
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, don't say that." Now the book version is pretty different. I think Frodo gets a few too many drinks. He starts dancing around on a table.
He does, but he does dance in order to distract from what Pippin's
saying. Talking about.
So, but Pippin didn't really step over the line completely.
Yeah.
I don't think. I can't actually remember that. But yeah, Frodo jumps up and starts doing the cow jumped over the moon, which Tolkien tries to kind of pass off as the original version of the source of that rhyme.
Our rhyme comes
like,
from this.
Only a little bit of the rhyme is remembered nowadays, but it used to be a lot longer. And Tolkien wrote this huge long poem for the fiddler and the cow jumped over the roof.
I love it. It's great.
So funny, man.
So he's performing that, and in the book version, he falls off the table, and the ring sort of slips on his finger because he had his hand in his pocket, and it sort of slipped on his fingers. He fell. Not really again over the top action director version where he drops it in the air and it's sort of falling towards him. It's like I'm trying to grab it, but it kind of again. It's an acceptable level.
It is
over the top.
It's acceptable, and I'll tell you why it's acceptable. The ring does have a mind of its own.
Yes.
So
exactly.
there's a way in which this whole weird sequence of events kind of like plays towards the ring's purpose, and it kind of positioned itself in that way. I don't know. I think that's fun.
Willed its way onto his finger.
Because that is what happened in the books, is that Frodo had no memory of how that ring got on his finger.
Yeah, he didn't realize he was invisible to everybody.
Exactly.
Everyone starts acting like so surprised. He's like, what the fuck?
And the way that Frodo is like, oh, the way that he comes out of it all and is like trying to make it like not a big deal. He's like, hey, I'm here. See, guys, I just snuck under the tables and I've been talking to my friend Strider here, which was not the right thing to say because they don't like Strider. Right. So they're like, okay, I already didn't like you, but if you're friends with Strider, like,
we really don't like
go away. Like, you're done today. And Frodo, he can't redeem himself.
Yeah. In this version, he sort of just like, this is where he sees the Eye of Sauron the first time.
Yeah. And he hears, there is no life in the void, only death. And I've looked into where that line comes from. It sounds correct.
Yeah,
it sounds like something Sauron would say. Right? It's not from the movies. It's not from anywhere in the movies. But I did find a very similar, interesting line.
You said the movies, the novels.
I meant the books, yeah. I found a very similar line. It is in the Silmarillion, or at the very least in the Book of Lost Tales. It made it into the Children of Hurin, which is where I'm familiar with it.
Yes.
But the Children of Hurin came out after this movie.
Way after.
So I'm like, well, where did that? Okay, but it was in the Lost Tales before the Children of Hurin. Yeah. So, and this is Hurin and Morgoth talking. And Hurin says, this last I say to you, thrall Morgoth, and it comes not from me, but from the lore of the Eldar, but it is put into my heart in this hour. You are not the Lord of men, and shall not be, though all Arda and Menelth fall in your dominion. Beyond the circles of the world, you shall not pursue those who refuse you. And then Morgoth responds, beyond the circles of this world, I will not pursue them, for beyond the circles of this world, there is nothing.
I love that.
And Hurin then says, you lie. And that is Sauron, right?
Yes.
So when Sauron says there is no life in the void, only death, he's saying that like the beyond or whatever it is, right? He's saying like there's nothing. Yeah. There is nothing. He's trying to empty Frodo's soul. Right, and to tell him, hey, as a god, I can inform you there is nothing. Yep. Give in, just give in, right? And that echoes what Morgoth said to Hurin. So I think that's maybe where the spirit of that line comes from.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
And remember when we were going to recreate that scene between Hurin and Morgoth on top of the tower? We were going to try to shoot a recreation of that. We figured we could do that.
That would have been so good.
We should still do that.
We should still do that. I've always wanted to like resurrect the Dark Crystal Chamber.
I think we could pull that scene. I think that's why we picked it, because it's basically just really good dialogue.
It's good dialogue.
Characters. Yeah. It's on top of a tower.
Sick matte paintings.
Just matte
good
paintings
actors
on a green screen in like a kind of a 360 space.
Yeah.
We just rent out a studio that has that and film that. But
get a freaking fan, get that wind blowing, get that weather. Yeah. And then
it would basically be kind of recreating the look on top of Orthanc in the films,
where
Saruman and Gandalf are kind of talking back and forth, and he escapes on the eagle.
Yeah, use that as a reference.
Yeah, but he's chained, right? He's chained to a chair, and he has to watch that, or he has to watch his children's lives basically fall apart.
The horror of the whole moment is that Morgoth says, "You will see what I see," right? Yeah. and I curse you to see what I see.
Yeah.
And that through Morgoth's eyes is how Huron is experiencing all of this.
Right.
So Huron is seeing the meaninglessness of the world,
Right.
because that's what Morgoth sees, and that's what Morgoth is letting him see. So he can't see anything but just the pain and the sorrow.
Man, and all of this was just a ploy to get him to try to go back,
which he
to
does
Gondolin.
do,
and he just
right?
goes and shouts at the mountains where it's
I
at,
know,
'cause
but
he
that
can't-
was
they
enough.
won't let him in.
Yes.
Dude, Morgoth is a freaking
He's a bad
He's awful.
person. He's a bad person.
like the way, because that story, if okay, well, this is a huge tangent from Lord of the Rings, but if you have not read The Children of Hurin,
You have to.
It's the best Tolkien story that there is, in my opinion. The version of it in the Silmarillion is fine, but it's great. But the actual book, Children of Hurin, is like freaking phenomenal.
It's very, very
It
good.
is
Yeah.
The best tragedy
Yeah.
in the genre of tragedy story that I've ever read.
I would agree with that.
It's like gut punching. It's just like sucks, but it's very good.
It's very good. It's the kind of thing that's just so horribly sad, but that you do feel renewed after reading it. You do feel edified in some sense, right?
Yes.
But it's weird to explain because I remember that's the first time I asked this question. I read that book and I put it down and I thought, why do humans long for stories that are tragedies?
Yeah.
Why do we have this longing for sad
Yes.
stories? Like
Yes,
music.
right.
The most beautiful music is often, not always, but often it is the saddest music. And why is it that the sorrow, that we have this connection to the sorrow, that we can find meaning in the sorrow? Anyways, it's a wild thing that humans.
This is actually a whole tone that Tolkien sought to create with his work. He wanted to
Yes,
create something
exactly.
that was inherently sad,
Yes.
but simultaneously hopeful.
and meaningful, deeply.
Yes. Like that did not leave you feeling despairing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that was an inherently sad, difficult story.
Yeah.
But you come out of it feeling like there's hope.
The Children of Hurin does that in a way that I don't think any other author could do.
No, and that's why it's so great.
It's so horribly
Because
sad.
like even something like Game of Thrones, right, which is like over and over again to an extent that's exhausting. It is gut punch. Oh, another sinking horrible event happens. Oh, another one happens. Oh, another, and it never gets better.
It's like tragedy for the sake of tragedy with no overlying theme of redemption and
It never really gives you that.
Yeah.
And that's what Tolkien's work does, particularly the ones that weren't written for children, like The Hobbit. Right? Anyway, and so there's a lot of music that evokes those dual feelings, and that tends to be some of my favorite music.
Me too.
Is music that evokes both feelings simultaneously.
That's true. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
feel
that's
like-
right. So it's like the sorrow.
Yeah.
It pulls you down into the sadness, but then offers you the potential of this upside
Yes,
to the same depths of your downside, a similar journey upward.
yes. It's a hard thing to
Yeah.
do.
Oh, yeah.
But I think that those are my favorite kinds of stories that are able to sort of evoke the two. Not the ones that are just overtly fun. I mean, again, comedies are good too. Like I love
Sure. Yeah,
one of
sure.
my favorite comedies are like Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure,
Oh,
which is
classic. Classic.
just completely silly, right?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a story that's like to some degree meant to be kind of a serious thing. You know, you're finding kind of a balance between the fun we're talking about when you go to the movies and just like mindless action or whatever, and just like turn your brain off and have fun. I don't tend to love to do that.
Yeah.
I want to have something in there that means something to me, that can move me. And there's a kind of a fine line of balance between the two, but you want to have that. You don't want to go all the way this way, like
Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones does. And you don't want to go too far that way to where it's like, okay, this is just it's too silly. I can't buy this anymore.
Yeah.
And I feel like Tolkien's stories really do a good job of finding that exact balance, which is why I think
balance it very well.
they're so popular. But somebody was
love it.
asking here in the comments, it's Children of Huron. Yes.
Yes. Children of Hurin.
Yes, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Huron. I don't know how that's supposed to be
Well, there's a
pronounced.
little accent, but
There's
I
a
don't.
little accent
yeah.
on the U. But anyway,
Okay. So back to Lord of the Rings.
back to the actual thing we're
So
talking
Strider just like grabs Frodo's shoulder and yanks him out, which he does not do. Strider is very much in the book. Strider is very much more diplomatic. He will speak. He tries to convince Frodo that he's a good guy and all that stuff. In this one, he's just like, dude, basically grabs him by the ear and just yanks him up, and is just like, all right, man. you're coming with me, and we can't wait for the wizard anymore. And like they're coming, like you're screwed. You done screwed up, kid. Like no more Mr. Nice Guy now.
It's a great line that he has. Yeah. That I really have always.
What
really
do you
liked.
want? A little more caution from you. That is a trinket you carry.
Yeah, it comes after the scene where you're supposed to believe that the ring wraiths are coming into the room where they're actually.
Yeah, that's right.
Them. That's a great. The way that shot is great.
When I was
juxtaposition, the way that they make you believe they're in the same.
And
place
then where Sam is like. And then, like right before the thing, you can hear his lips smack.
Opens his eyes at the same moment.
Yeah.
That is
the
great,
sound of the swords
filmmaking
sliding in.
Yes. Oh man, like the shing. Yeah. And there's a whoosh, whoosh,
they stabbed
whoosh,
something bulky.
Yes. Great filmmaking as far as building tension. They're misleading you. I feel like a lot of times the best storytelling is like a magic trick, almost like stage magic, right? I talk about this in a video that I did about Final Fantasy VII's plot twists. Mm-hmm. The best plot twists are the one where you get to that moment and you see the breadcrumbs that lead back, and the difference between a stage magician and a storyteller is that the storyteller reveals how the trick was done. Right. Where the magician was like, it's so obvious and so embarrassing if I were to reveal it that it would just break the illusion. So they don't tell you. But the storyteller does. But what that does is make you go, oh, it was so simple all along. I should have seen that coming. That's the best plot twist, when it comes together and you go, oh, it was in front of my nose the whole time. By just being dishonest a little bit. Usually they use an unreliable narrator to achieve this. Someone you trust, like Obi-Wan Kenobi, for instance, telling you that your father was killed, betrayed and killed by Darth Vader. We believe that because he's a figure that we see as trustworthy. He's lying the whole time. In Final Fantasy VII, Tifa gives credence to what Sephiroth is saying, so we buy it. But he's not telling the whole truth. Even earlier in the story, what Cloud was saying, we believed because they built him up as this soldier who knows everything about Shinra and the soldier program. And so like you believe what he's saying because everyone turns to him even for the tutorial of the game when he tells you about how to equip materia. So it's like, oh, we trust what he says. He knows what he's talking about. So in this sense, the filmmaker is telling you they're sleeping in the beds. And the Nazgul are walking right next to them. That's what they're telling you with those shots.
You're right.
They're lying to you.
Almost in those exact words. You're right.
They're lying to you with the cinematography. And so you're like, oh crap. And then you go, oh, who?
But see,
like it was really over across the street.
In some ways, that's the eucatastrophe that I mentioned in episode 1, right? The things get so hopeless, like what Sam says, things get so hopeless, how could they ever be made right again? And then, that's how it's going to happen, right? And you see the light of hope shine through, and you realize, and all of a sudden everything fits into place in this moment of basically when the magic trick happens, right? And you're just like, wow, I can't believe that.
So again, really, really great filmmaking as far as how they use the camera. The fact that they're withholding information from you, they're lying to you, but it appears this way, and then they reveal what's really going on. So excellent the way that they choreographed that. Butterbur's like hiding behind the desk, as they're passing in with their swords, and they come in, and the sound design again really great. It goes really quiet, right?
Oh, that's
as
right.
They're like walking in, and like the sounds of their boots.
And I love how the ring race, they have this like ceremonial way that they dispatch. Like they all line up, they all hold their swords together. A few of them step forward and move back. They all tilt them down, and it's like they have done sacrifices before. Like, it seems like they're part of this, like almost this cult that follows this this Dark Lord that they've they everything is just ritualized the way that they do it. It's really, really creepy. Really good.
Though. So after that, it cuts back into Across the Street. And this is the line that I was talking about that I really liked. He says. Frodo asks him, what are they, right? So he describes a little bit who they are. Great kings of men. Then Sauron the Deceiver gave to them 9 rings of power. Blinded by their greed, they took them without question, one by one falling into darkness, and now they are slaves to his will. They are the Nazgul, ring wraiths, neither living nor dead. At all times they feel the presence of the ring, drawn to the power of the one. They will never stop hunting you. That is
good.
That's if someone told me. I mean, that's like they do this in horror games and stuff where it's just like an enemy you can't fight or kill and it just chases you. Yeah. Alien Isolation is a game that does this where anytime,
you're right.
anytime, what's the name of the aliens in that? There's a name for them.
I used to know.
Fetch.
It sounds like a dinosaur almost. It's like a.
What are they called?
I used to know the name.
What are the names of the aliens called?
It's like a.
But yeah, Resident Evil 2 does this.
Prince of Persia does
Xenomorph. Thank you.
The Haka, a Xenomorph.
Yes. The Dahaka.
Dahaka. That's
the Dahaka in Prince of Persia. The Warrior Within.
It's always following.
It's always hunting you. There is a level of stress that is just like
invoked. Yeah,
almost hard to like keep playing the fetching game.
It's true.
And this is just playing a game. So imagine a real life scenario where you cannot kill the thing that is hunting you, and it will never stop hunting you the rest of your freaking life.
Yeah.
That is about the most terrifying thing I can imagine. You can't rest. You can't ever like be off your guard. At any time, this thing is looking for you, and there's just literally no escape.
You know what's crazy? Even if Frodo were to ditch the ring and somebody else, and he wanted to go back to Hobbiton, they still like got Gollum and tortured him because he used to have the ring, and they just want to figure out what he knows and what he can tell them.
Right.
So even if Frodo wasn't still in possession of the ring, they would still be hunting him. They'd be like, well, we don't have any leads. That Frodo guy, he knows. Let's go get him, you know?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he has it or not. He will always be hunted. And then even at the end, I think this is mentioned in the book, that if they ever did catch Frodo, even if they got the ring, they would just torture him for defying the Dark Lord. Like, there is no way, whether Sauron gets the ring or whether he keeps the ring or whether he gives it to someone else, he gets tortured. They will hunt him and torture him no matter what happens.
No matter what he does.
It's crazy.
And Gandalf put him in this situation.
Gandalf did this to him.
Feels totally responsible
sent him to his
for
death.
it.
Yep.
Yeah. And he even mentions this to him. He was like, you know, I in the book, he talks about when he started to suspect that it might be the one or whatever, and how responsible he feels that he basically doomed him to what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
It's like, look, you take this thing, they're going to kill you anyways.
The only way is to destroy it. And otherwise you will never know peace. And even afterwards, because of the wound, he never really knows peace until he can go into the West.
Yeah, that's true.
Ultimately just die.
Right.
But I've got...
you had something there.
More here with Strider. So Strider, his intro is super good because when I first saw The Fellowship of the Ring, I had not read the books. So I didn't know if he was a good guy or not.
Right.
And I remember very specifically how I felt when I watched this. It really stood out to me. But no matter whether he's a good guy or not, he seems like a beast. As soon as he takes off the hood and you see it's like a normal looking kind of dude, you realize he's probably not that bad. But I occasionally wonder like what makes Aragorn such a beast, and because why does he come across so cool, especially at the beginning there and throughout the books? But this intro was really important, really key to him, I think. And I think I figured it out more or less. It's that he's wandering between the two worlds, but he's doing it in a different way. So he lives in the muddy, dirty world, but is secretly a king, right?
Yes.
He's both noble and despised. Aragorn says that the Nazgul were kings of men too, but they reveled in it, right? They sought ever greater power. They were kings, they claimed their kingship, and they never stopped seeking for more and more power. And when Sauron was like, hey, here's a ring, they were like, boom, more power, I got it. And they succumbed to darkness. That was their path to the darkness.
Yeah, right.
Strider is a reluctant king who...
He
doesn't seek after more riches and power.
Forsakes his birthright for the longest time. Yeah.
Right. So the Nazgul live between two worlds, as does Aragorn. But Aragorn does so as a free one of the free peoples. Like he's a free man, whereas the Nazgul are slaves to Sauron. Right. Despite they're both kings, they're both like living in this weird world, but and they're both kind of in between two worlds. But Aragorn's is by choice. And there's a huge difference there because he's a reluctant king who doesn't look for riches and power, but he just wants to preserve the world from the darkness that threatens it. Right? So there's this big parallel between Strider and the writers. But he'll have to preserve that same morality as he ascends to the throne. which is very scary for him. Like, it's really hard to do because he knows the allure of power.
Right.
So the search for more power enslaved the writers, who are now mere thralls to a force that manipulates them like puppets. So what preserves Strider is his memory. That's why he becomes so obsessed with the past.
Yeah.
He's all about the past, and almost to a fault. Well, definitely to a fault.
Yes.
As R1 points out several times. Like, dude, you're not Isildur himself. You're just like his heir. Like, you're not him. You're not him. He's identifying so much with the past that he can't move forward. And he's stuck in this spot where he can't like waffle. He's stuck between the two worlds, just like the Wraiths are. But he preserved his agency, and he can make the right choice still. And he's doing it out of goodness, right? I think.
Right.
In the end.
That's a really good observation, and I think you're exactly right about that. That is what makes him as good, I guess, inherently good as a character, is his rejection of power. And
but
that's
at some point, he does need to accept it. He is the king. He's the only heir left.
Right.
But he's lived his whole life of like, no, I don't want it. Like, don't give me money. Don't give me fame. Don't give me power.
Yeah.
Those things corrupted my ancestors. I want no part of it. But you do need to do something. You do need to move forward, and you are the only one who can do it.
Yeah.
So he does need to claim this power. He just needs to do it in a way that is not the way that the Ringwraiths did it.
You know, this kind of touches on a point that I made in one of the videos that I did of the analysis of the book on my personal channel, where I was kind of working through this problem in my mind where it's like Gollum murders Deagle like the freaking second he lays eyes on the ring. And I was kind of going like, but he's supposed to be a sort of ancestor of hobbits, and hobbits are supposed to be like particularly resistant to this because hobbits don't care about power. That's kind of like the whole deal with them. The reason why they are like in particular just like resistant to its pull on them is because they just don't give a fetch about power.
Yeah, they're more
And so Strider similarly doesn't care about power. So why did Gollum like get ensnared
so
like
quickly
right away? And so I thought about, well, what if the Sackville Bagginses had come across the ring? So
you know what?
There are
a lot of the hobbits are kind of like
I
jerks.
think there are certain individuals in the community who would be who desire power and have all of the vices that would be ensnared immediately. And Gollum probably already was a pretty bad dude to begin with.
He harbored a lot of those ideas secretly.
And I think it is kind of contingent on this whole thing because Aragorn is one of the few characters outside of hobbits who does literally resist the ring.
That's true.
I think
Faramir in the book,
Faramir
does.
and Aragorn are like the two men who actually legitimately say, if I were to pass this thing on the highway, I would just like turn the other way and walk away.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that would possibly tempt me to take this thing.
Right.
Aragorn, Frodo tries to like freaking just offer it to him. It's like, take it. Like, would you take this? He's like, no, but I would have gone all the way to the mountain with you if I had to, you know. Just no, I would have done that. And it's this idea of the resistance of power, like, or the rejection of power. Yeah. Like, I don't want it. These are the people who are the least corruptible, right? And that's true of life. Like, and it's unfortunate that the people who get power are the ones who desire it. So they're the ones, because they desire it, they actually go and pursue political office or whatever. The people who would be best are the people who don't want it in the first place. And so they don't pursue political office.
Yes.
And so we never get the people we need to actually lead because they're uncorruptible.
Yes.
It's only the corruptible people who actually desire power who actually go out and pursue it.
Yes. And in a democracy, people have to run, people seek the privilege, and then we vote, right?
So it doesn't work.
Exactly. It's a problem. Tolkien has a really good line on that. And I wrote this down here. The most improper job of any man is bossing around other men. Yeah. Not one in a million is fit for it, and least of all, those who seek the opportunity.
Yes.
That's Tolkien specifically.
100%.
So Aragorn is certainly not seeking the opportunity, which qualifies him for it.
Yes.
So there's a paradox here, right? Something's going to have to give, right? Because he is only proving that he's more qualified to be the king. The more he rejects it, the more he's proving that it's his thing to do, right?
Exactly.
He just needs to come into it in a way that was not reaching up and grabbing the power for himself. It needs to be offered to him in a specific way that makes it so that he will accept it instead of taking it, right?
Yes.
Accept the gift from those around him. Anyways, I love the way that they're doing it here too, because in the books, I think Peter Jackson, he plays up the whole reluctancy of Aragorn more so than the books did. It's there in the books, but it's not as heavy. In the movie, they really dramatize it, especially with the museum scene with Arwen, where he's just like, he really is frozen. He does not know what to do. In the books, he's already kind of decided, like, I'm going to do this.
Right.
But he does not seek the privilege necessarily.
Yeah.
But in the movie, I do like how they do it. I do like that they've made him so reluctant, because it just helps us in a short period of time, helps us to understand that he is fit to be a king, especially given, like, in America, kings aren't like really a thing here.
We don't vote for kings.
We don't vote for kings. So it's like, it's a hard sell, right? But even an American will be like, because there's that mythology of American mythology, the story of George Washington and how he denied kingship and he didn't want to be president, but the people said, we want you to be president, and so he accepted the voice of the people in that regard. I don't know how accurate it is, but I've heard that's the story, right?
That's
and
the legend.
Stories are powerful.
All myths and legends
As the
are
legend
true.
goes, George Washington did not want the power, but then as Americans tell the story, but that's why we gave it to him.
Right.
And I wish that were still true today. I wish, but it is not.
All right. Anything else here? I think I want to at least get to Weathertop before we stop. So,
Okay, let's do this.
there is one scene in between as they're traveling, the funny scene where, what about breakfast? You've already
What
had
about second breakfast?
it. Second breakfast. That's my dad's favorite part of all these
Is it?
movies. And anytime, like,
No way.
my dad's not like the biggest fan of like fantasy. He likes more contemporary kind of fiction and in movies and stuff. He's not like a big fantasy guy. So like he has a hard time, but he'll do it with us. You know, Steve always likes to do marathons and things before like movies come out.
Oh,
There's a
that's true.
new Star Wars.
Yes.
We got to watch all the Star Wars now.
Go watch all of
and
them.
He'll just join in to
15
be
hours.
a part of the family, but not because he like necessarily loves these movies or anything.
Right.
But anyways, anytime we watch this movie, he just like starts laughing so hard at this part. He just thinks it's
Dinner,
so funny.
supper. He knows about them, doesn't he? I did think that was really funny.
He thinks it's so funny.
Yeah.
I think Pippin's his favorite character, but 11 sees luncheon, afternoon tea, dinner,
afternoon
supper.
tea?
He knows about them, doesn't he? And again, it does a really good job of sort of establishing the culture of hobbits, which I think is essential to these movies and these books working, which is why he led off with like telling you so much about the culture of hobbits, because it's like the whole point of this journey is to preserve this place. And if you're not in love with that place, you're not in love with these characters,
right,
and you don't like laugh and just like never want them to suffer.
Yes.
Like the whole stakes of the story don't work.
Right. So these are important.
Yeah, these moments are important.
Yeah. Because
And
that's the peaceful nature of a simple life.
Yes.
Is what they're fighting to preserve. And so don't be upset each time it shows its head, right?
Yes.
Because Pippin's just an idiot. But instead just smile and be like, these are hobbits, and this is what's worth
This
preserving.
is what we're fighting for.
This is what we're fighting for.
to keep Pippin alive.
And it's not, he's not going to become some scholarly, but he is going to do very important deeds in the future.
Yes.
That you would never guess having watched having watched this first movie.
Yeah, exactly. And so then after that, there is another scene, Saruman standing over the Palantir.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking with Saruman, or with Sauron.
Yeah.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
And then we're servants.
Work to do.
Yeah. We have work to do. So the first order of business, destroy all the trees.
Yeah, kill all trees.
And I've got this too, because we're talking about memory, we're talking about preservation, right? And memory is like such a big key, such a big theme in Tolkien. And when you talk about when the orcs come up to Saruman and they say, "Oh, the trees are strong; their roots go deep."
The trees are strong,
Yes.
my lord.
And he's like, "Rip them all down." And the idea of roots going deep, this is nature he's destroying,
Yes,
right?
that's true.
And deep roots is what connects you, right? That is memory. Memory are your roots that connect you to the past and to the ground and to the land and to where you are. People talk about, growing roots where you are kind of stuff. And like when he's talking about ripping the deep roots out of the trees, first off, memory is what connects you to things. It makes it harder for you to be ripped up, but it's still going to happen, right? Because Saruman's evil, and evil things will do what they do. So the deep roots, the memories, the connections to the past and traditions and things are important, but they're not alone. That's not going to save you, right? You need to innovate. That's the ends, right?
Yes.
You got to grow legs and walk around.
Well, that's
that's not really where I'm going.
This all kind of ties into what we've been talking about.
Since episode 1.
There's a certain tendency to preserve.
Yes.
And stay where it's comfortable.
And that's Aragorn, where he's all looking at the past. He's cleaning off the statues. He's preserving the sword. He's and he's being so particular on the past.
Yes.
But it's like, wait, buddy, you don't have kids, man.
Yes.
Like this can't go. You can't keep doing this. You have to move forward.
Yes.
You have to go somewhere.
That as much as people attribute this extreme conservatism to Tolkien as a religious man and politically probably was as well.
Yes.
These novels are very much about getting out of that conservation mindset and going out into the unknown, and that's where growth and character is built.
You maintain your connection to the past with your memories. You don't forget. You don't forget your purpose. You don't forget where you came from. You don't abandon the old traditions, but you do find new meaning. You do find new ways. You do find new traditions. You do find new items and things that you can bring back and that you can use to help. That salvation is not to be found staying where you are. Salvation is to be found in doing good out in the world.
Yes, moving out of where it's comfortable, not just adhering only to the traditions. Sometimes you got to break away from that and go find better ways.
Yeah.
And I really think that's an important theme.
I think so.
Really the main thing to take away from what these stories are trying to say.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway.
I agree.
So anything else about Saruman and Rip Them All Down?
No, but there's an extended scenes part here, extended scene in that version of the movies where Aragorn is singing the Lay of Luthien.
Right.
And talking about when Aragorn first saw Arwen, he thought that he had seen a vision of Luthien herself. He thought he was seeing Luthien because he had sung this song, right? And he's made the connection, but he isn't sure. He made the connection between him and Beren and Arwen and Luthien, but he's not sure if he wants the same fate. So he's in this weird spot where he's like, hey, I know the story, because this is so funny. Actually, the way, if you just read it, it would be like, this is weird. Frodo's like, who's that woman you're singing of? Luthien. She's an elf. She married a dude. And Frodo's like, oh, cool. What happened? She died. Go to sleep. That's how it reads. If you just read the script, it would be, she died. Go back to sleep. But the way it's delivered is like there's a pause in between and a pregnant moment, and then he says, go back to sleep, Frodo. But it's hilarious the way that it just kind of reads just on its face. But once again, this is Aragorn, just deer in the headlights, just not really. He isn't quite that way in the books, but in the movies, he really is.
We also have Gandalf where he catches the little moth.
Yes,
and
it's such a cool way to catch a moth without hurting its wings,
Yeah, it's perfect hold.
Yeah, just make a little cage with your hands. Oh, and this is good too. This is good because
tells him to go find the.
How would you put it? He's communing with nature.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's how Gandalf does things. That's how, same thing with Arwen when we see her riding a horse later on. How does she ride the horse? She talks to it.
Yep.
She's like, hey, Asfaloth, ride faster in Elvish, of course. And then the way that the Ringwraiths do things, the way Sauron does things, the way Saruman is starting,
nature.
you subdue nature by hammering it and burning it and breaking it, right? Yeah. And Gandalf famously in the books, he says, he that will break a thing to find out what it is has left the path of wisdom.
I love that line.
Such a good line. So don't just break stuff to find out what it is, right? Yeah. Nietzsche had a similar line. Yeah. But there's this great contrast here that while Saruman has trapped Gandalf up on the roof of Orthanc, he's thinking that Gandalf can't get down, right? Yeah. Because you need a ladder, or you need he's thinking too materialistically,
right?
Where it's Gandalf talks to bugs, dude. He's gonna this bug will tell that bug, and then they'll tell their friends, and then the eagles will eventually come, right? Gandalf isn't subduing nature; he's cooperating with nature. He's talking to it. He's convincing it. He's not forcing it, right? And that's the whole idea of the ring, is that it's the power to force people outside of their will, right? But Gandalf accepts their free will and then asks for a favor, and then out of their own volition they help him, and that's the proper relationship with nature. Anyways, really, really good stuff. So,
yep. Awesome. Okay, so
Now I'm at
we're
Weathertop,
we're
basically.
going to rush through this a little bit because we really need to wrap up. What happens in the scene is they come to Weathertop and Aragorn says something about it. This is the Watchtower of Amansul,
Which
gives
means
a little bit of history on
Hill
it.
of Wind, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like, okay, we're going to stay here for the night. Frodo goes to sleep. Aragorn goes to like scout, and the other hobbits, being oblivious, freaking naive morons, start like a fire,
Pippin.
which can be seen from miles around.
Yes.
And are like, oh, let's cook some freaking sausages and bacon. And Frodo wakes up to this, like, you idiots, like, put that out. Everyone could see us up here. And they're like, whoa, ash on my tomatoes.
Ash on my tomatoes.
But that's when they hear the shrieks, right? Like, oh, crap, they know where we are.
Yep.
So they go to the top, and the ring wraiths come up there, and they're facing off against them. It's all in slow motion, some pretty cool shots. Frodo gets stabbed. He puts on the ring thinking he'll disappear and evade, but he actually goes into their wraith world when he does that.
Yeah,
they can actually see him better, and he can see them, how they
and
truly
the ring
are.
kind of glows too. It's pretty cool.
And they're trying to like grab the ring and take it. And then Aragorn shows up last minute and has fire and fights them all off.
Yes.
So that's like what happens in the scene. Now we're going to talk about how there's a shot and how it's again, the seeds of like, I think it's not bad action directing. It's action directing for the purpose of getting at a feeling of what the characters are going through, not for actually building a believable sense of space and moment to moment. This guy's here and he's moving in this direction and he should be here now. And he just pauses for no reason and waits for Frodo to react instead of just continuing to grab him. Right. Like it's just not like logically sound as far as it's directing. And that's why it bothers me. But again, it's probably more just trying to get the reactions of the characters and instill, oh no, he's so afraid. But this is actually part of, I've come around a little bit on this idea that Frodo's depiction in the films kind of betrays a little bit his courage in the books.
True. I think that's
which
true.
is something I think Dude McGuy asked me in the past to touch on. And now I'm seeing it because I watched this through with Caroline. And she's a big like Harry Potter fan. She didn't love Lord of the Rings. She was like, I'm on this team, not that team kind of thing growing up. So we were watching it. And as we're going through the movies, she was like, oh my gosh, I actually really, really like this. So she was loving it in Fellowship. And then by the time we get to the end of Return of the King, she's just like, oh my gosh, like Frodo, shut up. Like, stop whining. Like, stop being such a pussy all the time. Like, dude, all he does is, like for like an hour straight in slow motion. And I actually came to a point where I kind of agreed with that. It's he's just too wimpy. By the end of it. And I know they're trying to depict the
hardship,
burden
the
is
weight,
so heavy that he just has nothing left. But I think it goes a step beyond being to the point of being annoying. And so we were talking about the differences between this scene in the book and the film. They don't go on top of the tower to fight the ring wraiths.
No.
They actually, because that's stupid. Like, let's go spend the night on the place that is like the one like landmark all around here that people can see for miles. No, that's not how you stay hidden. You go away from that. So they go into like a dell and they stay there.
And that's where
they have the fight.
Yeah.
And Frodo tries to like lunge at them, right? And fight them.
Which was very brave indeed.
Yes. And all the hobbits do. And in the movie, they're coming towards him and he sort of just like drops his sword and like falls over and it's like, and he takes the ring out and puts it on, right? But the string of shots here, they're like right next to them. They've got all their swords out pointing at them. And then there's like 20 seconds of Frodo being able to drop his sword, fall down, look inside at the ring, and there's not, and the ring wraith just pause, I guess.
They aren't even really looking at him. I think I figured out what's happening. So first, Sam is the brave one who jumps
he tries to jump, and they just knock him over.
Like nothing. And then they grab Merry and Pippin, pull them aside, but I think they're searching those three hobbits. It almost sounds like they forgot about Frodo.
The thing is,
because Frodo's like getting away.
Why aren't they just stabbing them and searching their corpses? This is my point.
Yes. That's what they would do.
There is no reason why they would just grab them and move them to the side.
Right. But so
like, they've got the swords pointed right at them. Stab the dudes and take them and search them. Like,
so as Frodo is pulling out the ring, none of the 5 wraiths are looking at him.
no,
Which is funny. And then the lead one, I guess it would be the Witch King.
It would be the Witch King,
He
yeah.
slowly starts to like
Turn his head.
turn. And it's like they had forgotten about him.
That's what it appears like, because like they are literally all
Yeah.
as close to them as I am to you.
Right,
They
very
are
close.
right here, and their swords are like right there.
Yeah.
And they just like apparently stop. Okay, it's not our turn yet.
And there's 5 of them,
Wait
right?
for the cameras to come to us as he reacts and falls over and pulls the ring out. And while he's doing that, we're just going to kind of wait, and I'll be looking over here actually, and then he's pulling it out. Now I'll look back.
You got that shot.
And it's
the
a
head
cool shot, but it's a cool shot for the sake of having a cool shot,
Yeah.
not for the sake of building continuity between these shots for
Yeah.
a fluid sense of action that moves from this point to this point. It's like they literally have to stop and be frozen in time doing nothing for these events to unfold the way they do. And so I'm not a fan of the way he's shooting the action because it's completely emphasizing only the reaction of the character and what they're feeling. And it's taking no account for, does this make any sense to be happening like this? And it does weaken, I feel, Frodo a little bit. It makes him look like he doesn't have courage in the face of this danger. And in the books, he clearly does.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. That's a good point.
I ended up not being
Isn't
a big
it
fan
in
of
Moria?
this scene.
Isn't Frodo the one that stabs the foot of the like the troll or the
I
big,
think
the leader?
so.
Frodo multiple times he shows his bravery in ways that in the movies they really did hold him back.
Yeah, and they really make him look weak, like really, really weak. And it gets more and more and more so as it goes on. And again, I know that the point of it is the burden's very heavy and he's out of energy. He's got nothing left in him by the end.
And
But
that
it's-
helps
yeah.
Smeagol to relate to him and Smeagol to take advantage of him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, like I said, I didn't notice these things the first time I saw the films. I was just like, oh, this is freaking awesome.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I loved it. But like, as I watched how action in the movies progress, and then they get into The Hobbit, they get just totally out of control. I start seeing even the seeds of that, like I've been saying here. I don't think there's really any action scene in this film that I would say is excellent. It's good and serviceable, but it's not like a really excellent action scene.
I'd agree with this scene, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like what really carries these films are the performances and the writing, the music, the sentiments they're getting across about courage and the point of this journey and resisting power and these things we're talking about. This is the core of what makes it so good. It's not the action scenes and the battles, and although those are good and there are really good moments, like when they come over that hill in the Two Towers at the break
With
of
Éomer?
dawn, it's phenomenal.
Very good.
A lot of the war scene where they're flinging the heads into the city and
well, and the
they're
intro,
good.
the prologue is very well
I'm
done.
not saying it's all bad. I'm just saying that it's not phenomenal as action set pieces. There are definitely way better examples, I feel, of really great action. I don't think Peter Jackson as a director that's not his strength, in my opinion, is
I'd agree with
action.
that, yeah.
I think his strength is in getting the right delivery for that line out of the actor and the sense of scale he's able to create with a lot of the shots that he gets. A lot of the shots we're talking about. Again, that's probably him and the director of photography working together, but anyway, that's just the sense I got upon watching it this time. I was like, not in love with the way this was shot.
Well, and the whole throwing the torch so it sticks in the wraith's head.
Right,
I don't know. I don't know what it's sticking in when that happens.
And the way
I don't
he flails his arms, it looks so silly.
Yeah.
He's like,
So, anywho, I think that was an early shot scene for the Fellowship.
I think it was the first thing they shot.
Well, it was, but with a different actor.
Yeah,
they had to shoot it again. But I still think it was an early.
Yeah, really early
shot
on in the process.
So Amun-Sul means the hill of wind, which is where the name Weathertop. So wind is weather, and top means just height or high or hill, right? And I love the way, so Tolkien gives like 3 names to everything. Everything is like, oh, it's called this, but in the dwarves call it this, but we just say, and then it's some like weather
the
top.
common tongue.
Yeah, Amunsul.
The Elvish, the High Elvish.
Yes.
And then whatever other language he chooses or decides.
Whatever it is, anything, or the ancient name, or even what the elves also call it elsewhere. Or,
Yeah,
but
different. The
everything has,
Sindar
like, 3
versus
names.
the Eldar
Kenya or Quenya.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. So I love it though. I love it. Okay, so the Isengard shots as the moth flies away and the camera just like falls off of Orthanc, and you just like get
That's
this
sweet shot.
crazy shot through all these miniatures and different kind of CG elements.
Yes.
And it's unbelievably well done, especially for its time. Like these shots were really, really cool.
I am still. I'm going to die on this hill as a filmmaker for the rest of my life. It pisses me off that they stopped using miniatures for things.
Yeah.
That they've moved almost exclusively to CGI for anything, any shot like this.
Yep.
Even in the Hobbit films for the orcs, they became CGI orcs instead of guys in costumes. But in Star Wars movies, I wish that they would mix, because not that I love the new trilogy, I don't, or just the new movies, but there was at least a nice attempt made there to mix the practical with the CGI versus the prequel trilogy, which was just so heavily CGI everything.
Yes.
Lucas was all pushing the digital side of things.
Yes, and that was
I mean, shooting on digital cameras.
Yeah, that's right.
What the fetch? Nobody was doing
2K,
that yet.
I think the prequels were mastered in 2K.
Yeah.
Which is, you got 8K TVs now, but sorry, this was digital, man. Like
Exactly.
you can up-res, like there's ways to get around it, but it's not the same.
It's not. And so it doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel like everything feels so
Exactly.
artificial in comparison.
And
where
plastic.
Everything in the original trilogy was real, sort of like dirty and used and like feel very sort of lived in and tangible.
Yeah.
And one thing I do like about the look of the newer films is they've tried to be faithful to that look of the original trilogy with their designs and the way that they would use practical androids on the set with the CGI ones. They'd mix them together in a way to where it blends really well and it feels really nice. But they don't do that with spaceships. And I wish they would. I wish they would go back to using models for at least some of the spaceships.
Interstellar, they actually had a spaceship model that they used.
But that's Nolan's whole thing.
Yes, that's true.
They didn't even shoot on green screen. They had actual, like, just a black backdrop with like little lights for stars. And he tries as much as possible to make everything like, practical.
Stanley Kubrick. And to do it that way.
That's the way I wish filmmakers would go back to, because I look at these shots in Lord of the Rings of these miniatures of, say, the Tower of Orthanc, or the freaking Sauron's castle in Mordor or whatever.
Yeah,
and it's like that looks like a real freaking thing, because it is a real freaking thing. So I miss models, but a lot of why that shot sells so well is because they're filming over the top of an actual model and dropping their camera down, and then they're filling in, with CGI transitions
for most part. Yeah.
And it really works.
Yeah.
It still looks really good. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents on I wish they would freaking use models more often.
Back to a more thematic kind of perspective here. Saruman has turned this beautiful forest valley into a pit of fire. Yeah. Fire is everywhere. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, fire being heavily associated with the ring, fire being heavily associated with the new, I don't know what you'd call it, just the imitation of light, right? It's like
fire of industry.
The pretend light. Yeah. Yes. The forests will burn in the fire of industry. So it's very good. And then this is, of course, where we're introduced to the Uruk-hai for the very first time. Yep. And this is by no means the first time that it has been mentioned, but it always bears repeating. It is very important to note that the first thing an Uruk-hai does when it's born is kill something, right? That's very important. And Saruman is perfectly willing to sacrifice his little orc, the little Sauron orc imports, right, for his own like homegrown, super powerful beasts. And it's funny because Saruman's not the least bit afraid of these guys. But I also wondered this too, and especially when I first watched the movie, they are being born, right?
Yes.
Okay, because Gandalf says specifically what's happening here. He says that Saruman has crossed orcs with goblin men.
Yes.
And this is how it's done.
Yeah.
I don't want to be critical, because the other way, maybe a more natural way with like an orc being pregnant, also going to be weird if you're showing any. And Tolkien does not really elaborate on exactly how a lot of this stuff happens.
Obviously, the process, whatever it is imperfect, because they show one of the Uruk-hai who's just got this completely freaking broken, jacked like jaw.
Yeah,
it's just like dislocated entirely.
Yep.
And he's like the little orc dude's like checking his jaw
to
make sure that it's like in place. But yeah, like there's a messed up process, I think is the point.
Yeah, they basically tortured these beings into becoming something other than what they would naturally be.
Yeah.
Right? You're kind of forcing this orcish behavior out of something that maybe there's different theories. Even from Tolkien himself, I don't know that he really settled on a specific theory. In the movies, Saruman says specifically, they were elves once. And that is a thing Tolkien wrote about.
Yes.
But also, I don't know that Tolkien necessarily like settled on one specific definition for where exactly the orcs come from.
Yeah, or at least it's vague. Like when you read the Silmarillion, it does say that the first thing elves encountered, they were born into the darkness before the sun, before the light of the trees. So they basically were born under the starlight. That's all they had.
Yeah.
But if they wandered too far away from their little village,
Morgoth
there was
chilling.
Morgoth out there waiting to capture them.
Right.
And what it's believed to have happened is those early elves who were captured were then sort of changed into what became orcs.
And that's in the Silmarillion, I think, and that's more or less the version that they're going with here. But Christopher Tolkien had several options to choose from when compiling the Silmarillion. Yeah. That's the one he went with. It sort of makes sense, but also still, like, just because you corrupt two elves, and if they have a child, is that it's an orc now.
I would say the DNA would have to be altered through whatever magical torture he did.
Maybe we are getting too deep into Tolkien there. We're talking about DNA. Tolkien didn't really care about DNA in terms of that, right? So, anyways, now we come back to after Frodo has been stabbed.
Yeah.
And it's Mr. Bilbo's trolls.
Yeah,
right? You get to see the statues.
Yeah, you barely see them. They're kind of there in the background, but this is where Bilbo's first sort of dangerous event took place in his journey.
Yeah.
When all the dwarves were captured and they're going to be eaten, and he snuck around and kept them talking until the morning came when
it's so funny. I love it.
They turned to stone.
Dawn take you all, but it's only in the extended edition that they point it out, but it is there in the background of the of the shots, even from the theatrical version as well. And this is really good. So as soon as it's like, "Hey, Frodo's fading, we're not making it. We're in trouble," right? Aragorn's saying, "Okay, we need some Kingsfoil," right? And this is actually really good symbolism here, right? Kingsfoil, it's a weed. Kingsfoil is a weed.
This is
Aragorn.
a very good point you're making.
Think about Aragorn. Now, this is so good. Kingsfoil being a weed is similar to Aragorn himself. A plant with healing medicine named after kings is now known only as a weed to modern folk and grows sparsely in the north. Anyways, it's kind of a bit of a metaphor for Aragorn himself, or for the lineage of kings. It's been lost, right? The utility, this like really useful. And of course, the king's hands are healer's hands. In the Return of the King, we find that out. And so the idea that the weed is actually secretly harbors this, beautiful potential is Strider, the wild man, secretly being a king. You know, it's almost like if you're really deep into symbolism, just based on that, you could have maybe figured out who Strider was before the Council of Elrond.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's a really, really good point you make. It's more about the way people perceive the plant.
Yes, exactly.
What it actually is is this medicinal herb, this extremely useful, valuable, beautiful medicinal herb.
That has somehow been allowed.
Regard it
exactly
as a nuisance.
A nuisance, yeah. Superfluous.
Get this out of my garden. This is useless.
Yeah. Right.
I don't need this.
And
this is a weed.
Is it because they don't know the use, or is it because it probably
been forgotten?
Right. Yes, it's been forgotten.
The line of kings has been forgotten.
Yes.
Their importance has been forgotten. The men of Westerness, their whole lineage has been forgotten practically by the whole world.
It's just a legend now.
Yeah.
You could almost hear somebody say, "Oh, I heard that once Kingsfoil cured people, but now it's just, a nuisance."
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that though. That's something that I got this time that I've never really gotten from any other viewings of this before.
Major difference though between the film version here
Yeah.
versus the novel
Of course.
is the arrival of Arwen, who shows up and you see the blade come to his neck.
A ranger caught off his guard.
Caught off his guard.
So what do you think? What is your personal feelings about Glorfindel and the lack thereof in the movies?
It makes sense to me in the movies to replace Glorfindel, who essentially only is present in this story, in this part.
Yes.
And he doesn't ever show up again.
I think he's sitting down at the dinner or at the council. But
he's probably there or present at the Council of Elrond, but he takes no role further in the story.
Right.
So if you're looking at this from like the writer Tolkien's perspective, his world is so expansive. Like Glorfindel's role is not just, I was here to take Frodo to Rivendell.
And nothing else.
And nothing else.
Yeah.
Because in his world, his role is so much more expansive than that.
And it goes way back. I think he was the first of the elves, to kill a Balrog.
Yes.
Basically does it himself.
Well, Glorfindel's like freaking beast.
He is beyond, he is such a beast.
And so when you're looking at it from his perspective, this is not just some small role. It's a hint at this really amazing figure who has done amazing things in this world, which is a lot of what's happening as I've been reading the book. He just sort of like takes you past a place and like references how awesome that is and leaves it at that. And then
it's like a drive-by tour, as if you're like on a tour bus and the tour guide is just like, "Oh, if you look over here, anyways, let's keep going." And it's like, "Wait, I want to know more about that." But the tour continues.
Yes. And so the stories were more or less just hints at what his real work in all of this was, which was his entire mythology.
Yeah.
And which he never published. And he was told over and over again by his friends, nobody would be interested in reading this. But like, that's what his real passion was. I mean, he wrote a language or several languages for this world he developed. And that was really what the project was. Right. Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit were just these little side sort of like, projects in his larger project.
Yeah.
So when you look at it from his perspective, I can see why, referencing Glorfindel would be a really cool little reference to drop in there.
Oh, yeah.
As a reference to my bigger thing.
Right.
But
he's all about that.
when it comes to just looking at the Lord of the Rings as a story in itself, Glorfindel feels pretty pointless in that story. And so replacing him with Arwen, I think, is a really good choice for the films.
I agree with
Giving her a larger role because she needs it, because she's so integral to the story of Aragorn.
Oh, totally, yeah.
And she's not focused on in the books enough, in my opinion, to supplement that sort of like subplot of Aragorn and Arwen's love and sort of like the ending that they get together.
Yeah.
You don't see enough of that. It's all in the appendices.
And it's in the appendices, and it's merely hinted at throughout the text of at the Council of Elrond, Frodo, or at the dinner before the Council of Elrond, Frodo sees Arwen there with Aragorn and is like, "Oh, wow, like this is interesting." And then, who's that woman? But then you never see her again, I think, until the end, until they're like departing.
Right.
And it's like, wow. It's crazy. And even Bilbo says, "Oh, Lady Arwen came today. This is a big deal," right?
Yeah.
You don't often get to see her. And that's true throughout all the books. But once again, it's like a drive-by tourism thing. "Oh, and if you look to the left, you'll see Lady Arwen. She's standing in her beautiful gown. Anyways, back forward." And that's Tolkien, though. He's a tour guide. And I really think he sees himself.
That's a great way of looking at
it. And that's not to diminish Arwen's role at all. It's just to say that he has such a big world that he's trying to convey to everybody. And it's so difficult to pack it all in.
Yes.
And he basically, what's so beautiful, there was a letter that he once wrote talking about the idea of an unattainable vista, that the important thing when you are telling a fantasy story is not to explain everything.
Yes.
To not indulge the person's curiosity, right? You need to leave that curiosity. As there's an old saying that says, leave them while they still want you to stay.
Yes.
Because if you stay too long when they want you to leave, then it becomes, a bother. But if you leave when they want more, if you leave people wanting more, then that pulls their curiosity more into it. And it encourages the idea that Tolkien talks about in his essay on fairy stories, the idea of subcreation. It encourages you in your mind to kind of fill in the gaps a little bit and to make this, to connect things on your own, or to come up with ideas, or maybe to pursue deeper works on this mythological world, right? And then, kind of figure it out that way. But he is not about just presenting everything to you. Yes. He wants you to be drawn. He wants you to be, he's almost flirting with you when this happens. Like he wants you to be seduced. He's seducing you into this world, right? Through these hints and these glimmers of beauty and these things that are glittering everywhere. But then at the same time, he's pulling you in to this deeper theme that he has, and that these things are kind of all serving that purpose, but they keep you captivated. It does a very good job of that. Some people complain that he explains useless things a little too much. I don't really agree with that. I think that he keeps your attention and he piques your curiosity every page.
Yeah. It's really interesting you bring all this up. This is something that's been on my mind and something I was planning on. I am eventually going to come back and make more videos on my main channel about Lord of the Rings.
Oh, good.
It's been a mess on this move and everything. I just have not had time. But I've gotten back to reading the book again a lot more, and so I'm making more progress there. But
good.
So I was thinking about this because just the other night we watched The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, nice.
And then the next night we watched The Neverending Story. Like kind of back to back.
When's the last time you watched Neverending Story?
I want to say probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Okay, so it's been since you've been.
It hasn't been since I was a kid.
Okay.
But
I have not watched it in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I have heard tell of people saying, do not watch this movie as an adult. It did not age well.
No, it's awesome.
Okay.
It's great.
I'll watch it again.
I freaking love it.
Okay, good.
And part of what I loved about it, and this is all sort of related to, of course, like the novel that I finished but have now revising.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a mistake that I made in the last version of it, I guess. The last, what's the word for it? Manuscript? Draft or manuscript, yeah. The last manuscript that I finished, I think I tried to over-explain a lot of things. Because, and I think that's a little bit of sort of the trend of more modern fantasy versus like older fairy tales and fantasy. Being a little bit more almost like scientific and trying to explain how magic works. Because I do agree with the premise, magic shouldn't solve your problems if we don't understand how the magic works, because then it just feels like Deus Ex Machina.
Right.
It can feel a little hollow, just save the day. But there were 2 instances in both of these films when essentially a Deus Ex Machina happened, but it works still. And it actually increased my interest in the wider world. So in The Wizard of Oz, there's the portion where I think Galinda, that's the name of the Wicked Witch, right?
I think she's the Good Witch, actually.
No, Galinda is the Good Witch of the North. What is the name? Anyway, I can't remember the name of the Wicked Witch of the West, the main villain of the story. But they're walking through like a field leading up to the Emerald City. And she puts a spell over these flowers there that makes them fall asleep, right? And then she's going to like kidnap them or whatever. And they all fall victim to it except for Strawman, who can't, he's not biologically capable of the poison affecting his body, and same with Tin Man, right? They're not like human beings. So, but the lion, the dog,
they all fall asleep.
They all fall asleep
in the poppy field, I think.
In the poppy field, and they're trying to wake them up, and they can't figure it out. Like, help! Like they're just like totally useless. And then Galinda, essentially, her power shows up and just wakes them up, and they just go walk off. Like I would see this in a modern context of like a fantasy story as being Yeah, that's a real Deus Ex Machina. That's real anticlimactic. There was no actual conflict that ended up happening there.
Right.
None of Galinda's minions came, and they had to fight them off
monkeys,
somehow.
the flying monkeys.
Galinda just showed up and went, "You're awake now," and solved the problem.
Right.
Similarly, in the Neverending Story, when he's in like the swamp of sadness, his horse is already sunk, and he's already talked to the old turtle person or character, I forget the name of the turtle character, who tells him, nothing matters. You won't be able to go to where you need to go. It's 10,000 miles away. You'll never get there. Nothing will eat everything. Just accept it. And so he's like trying to get out of the swamp. He's sinking, and the wolf is coming after him. Yeah. And it's like he has no way out. And then the dragon shows up and like grabs him and flies off, and just like takes him 10,000 miles to the place. Right? It just solved the problem.
Right.
This thing just showed up out of nowhere, solved it out of magic, and in both cases, I feel like typically, or in a more modern context, my critique to the writer would have been, it would have been nice to have had a hint beforehand that this dragon exists.
That this was even possible. Yeah.
Yes, or that Galinda is watching over them, or hint at some, so it doesn't just feel like, oh, okay, the problem's just solved.
Yeah.
But it really worked in both instances, and I didn't need an explanation behind it. It just made the world feel more magical.
Oh, sure.
So I've been playing with trying to figure out, why did it feel that way? Is it just because I loved these movies growing up and so I'm trying to justify them? No, I don't think that's the case. I think that it is important, like you're saying, in a fantasy story to build it out. So there are explanations. There is a reason behind it. I could tell you what it is, but I'm not going to always explain it. But if you've developed it to this insane degree, and you know the answers and you know why they're there, but you don't always have to tell them, especially early on in the hero's journey, them being rescued by characters, and Tom Bombadil's a great example of this in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Where they're just going to get freaking eaten by the willow.
Yes, it's happening.
And there's nothing they can do. And then Tom Bombadil just shows up and just saves them. I think early on in the story, it's good, and even it's not only okay, I think it's a good idea to have someone come in and just scoop them up and rescue them from early danger.
Sure.
Because they are, if we're looking at this as the journey as a life, they're early in their development. They're little, they're like infants, or like in the course of their beginning of the journey's life, it's in infancy still. It needs a parental figure. It needs the wizened sort of like person to come in and like pick them up and like carry them. And then that figure eventually will disappear as they go into the maturity of the quest. And then they're going to have to face something alone.
Right.
And it happens in both of these movies. When they have to actually go face the Wicked Witch, Galinda's not there to help them.
Galinda doesn't show up,
And even Oz is saying like, go give me the broomstick of the witch. Right. And no one's there to help them. They have to figure it out. So this causes the three characters, the lion who needs courage, the Tin Man who needs a heart, and the straw man, or the scarecrow who needs a brain. They have to find what they really wanted inside of them already.
Right.
It forces them, now that no one's there to save them, to come out, make a smart plan, have the courage to face something and not run away. And they end up emerging with those things that they had already inside them to begin with.
Right.
And Galinda is not there to save them. Similarly, when Atreyu in the Neverending Story has to face the oracles, and then eventually the mirror, he has to actually look at himself.
Is a big one,
There's no dragon coming in to save him at that point. He's got to do it himself.
And there's a great metaphor with the mirror.
Yes.
There too.
Yes.
They say even the greatest soldiers can't bear to look in the mirror.
They brave men find out that they are cowards. Kind people find out they're actually cruel.
Right.
But what I found fascinating about it is that in both of these cases, the Deus Ex Machina moments came early in the quest, when the quest was still young and infant, needing a parental figure to help. But in the stages of maturity of the quest, this is when the characters got to face the stuff themselves. And so Tom Bombadil's a great example of that, but later on in the story, Gandalf, all these characters are eventually gone.
They're eventually going to leave.
Frodo's going to have to, and Frodo and Sam are going to have to freaking do this themselves.
Yeah.
Even Aragorn at the end of This story, the first story, is no longer with them. They're totally on their own, and no one can help them now. So I don't know why I got on a tangent. What were we talking about?
Unattainable vistas and piquing curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think when you're writing a fantasy story, it's actually really key to not get bogged down in the details and over-explain.
I think so. Yeah.
And to just allow the person to sort of fill in a lot of that world with their imagination. Right. I think it's really key to what the spirit of that genre is.
Right, yeah, fantasy.
And I felt like I had gotten to a point where I was really over-explaining, and after watching these two movies, it's clear to me that's not necessary to do that.
Yeah.
Even if you're afraid it's going to feel like a Deus Ex Machina, as long as you do it early on, it's actually going to build intrigue for the world. But at least give your characters at some point the ability to face a challenge themselves with nothing coming to save them. And anyway.
Glorfindel is kind of that.
He is.
Bit. And
yes.
In a book, he can mention these great characters and these noble deeds. And every time the elves show up, this is a really good thing. They took that intro of Glorfindel, where he's like just this bright being that just emanates this like glory as he rides this horse with these bells on it. And they do that with Arwen. As Arwen walks towards Frodo and he's kind of waking up, he's basically totally out of it. She looks just like this angelic, being coming out of heaven, basically, to come and help her out.
Come rescue them.
And her voice is really good. By the way, Liv Tyler has a really good. She sounds very convincing when she speaks Elvish.
Yeah.
And so she shows up, and they kind of slowed her voice down a little bit, but I thought it was really, really well done. She seems like an angel.
I feel like that was a technique used across the three films, and most especially in Return of the King. Filming at 30 frames per second.
Yes,
slowing
I've noticed
it down
that.
slightly.
Just a little bit.
Like dream-like slowness.
Yeah, not like super.
But what's so funny about that is they would have had to then re-record
the lines.
All of those lines later to talk slower a little bit. It's a technique that works really, really well in this film, and I think is overused in Return of the King. But
really?
But in this scene, I think it's great.
Gotcha. So Arwen seems like an angel to Frodo. It seems that we've strayed into a dream. Later, when Aragorn says, when he first met Arwen, he felt he had strayed into a dream. So this is the same thing. We're kind of seeing the way that Frodo sees Arwen show up here is likely the way that Aragorn first saw Arwen when he first met her, where it's just like this fuzzy time period and like, oh my gosh, am I dreaming? Like this, the fairest, lady in the whole world.
Probably in the world at this point. Maybe aside from
there's Galadriel. Melian is still alive, like in Middle Earth.
I guess she's there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really good. But we get to basically see what Aragorn later describes. We get to see right now from Frodo's perspective, which is really good, especially as an introduction to the audience. It's not just Frodo; it's us. The way we get to see Arwen here is the way that Aragorn saw it, which was really good. And this is really interesting, by the way, because she's saying, "I'm the faster rider," right?
Yep.
And this is correct. Elves can walk on snow. That horse probably... The audio cuts out here, but I'm talking about how the horse probably didn't feel anything on its back, and that Gandalf can speak to animals. He can speak to the animals. Radagast has a similar kind of thing. Elves are really good. Elves taught the trees to speak, like the elves, they go around and they teach nature to speak. That's what they do. It's one of the things that they do. And so Arwen, one of the reasons why she would be the faster rider, not just that she's an elf, but she talks to the horse. She doesn't need reins and spurs and whatever it is. She doesn't need to whip the horse to get it to do what she wants it to do. Yeah. She just speaks to it, and the horse knows. There's like a connection there, which is I think that's really fun, because the way the Black Riders use the horses, you see this a little bit. You can see the horses are like constantly bleeding. The horseshoes, you got the nails kind of coming out of their feet, and their eyes are red, and it just they don't look right. The way that Sauron dominates nature is so completely the opposite of the way that the elves, and specifically Arwen and the more fair and free folk, not necessarily the free folk, I guess mostly just the elves and the wizards, but the way that they take into account the agency of nature. that you have a say in it too. Like, I will convince you to ride. I'm not going to force you to carry me if you don't want to. We're going to have a conversation, and you're going to do it of your own volition, right? It's so polar opposite. I feel like you get this really interesting contrast between the way Arwen rides her horse and the way the Dark Knights treat and ride their horses. They got all that heavy armor. Like, those horses got to not be doing well. And of course, they die.
You're suffering.
Spoiler alert, the horses all die. But it's really good. So the elves can preserve nature and work with it through speech, right?
Yes, right.
And then we come up to the river Bruinen is my next note here.
Yeah.
The audio cuts out here again, but we're talking about the shapes of horses on the river as the flood washes away the ring wraiths.
Yeah. That's a tough shot.
It was very.
It's a really.
Then the audio cuts out again, and the entire episode actually needed to be scrapped. So we're just going to pick up again, starting here.
How far into that conversation
we
got?
My notes right here have it, and it was basically at that line that I had read when Arwen says, "What grace has given me, let it now pass to him."
Yes.
Right? And that was, first off, I found it interesting that was essentially a prayer, because who is she talking to? And this is one of the hints at the greater world beyond the Lord of the Rings in the movies. But also, this is a foreshadowing, because, she's saying, I give my grace to Frodo. Well, I don't know exactly how everything works out necessarily. Just because she said that, does that mean that's what happens? Well, I don't know. But I do know that Frodo goes to the Undying Lands, and she does not.
Yes.
And she becomes mortal and ends up dying.
That's right.
And that this moment here where she's like, I'm giving the grace that I have, the grace of the Valar, I'm going to give it to Frodo, right? And what ends up happening with the end of the movie is like, well, that's kind of cool. I just think it's really cool, because this was not in the books.
Right.
But it's a very good way of Peter Jackson kind of showing his understanding of the books, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
As he kind of writes new lines.
Yeah, I think that's a great reading of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we're just at Rivendell.
Yeah, big difference being that Frodo was on the horse alone in the novel.
That's right, because the horse, it was like a beast horse that
really
apparently
fast.
never lets people fall off of it. Because Frodo's like groggy at that point. He's like not, but the horse, it's like, Glorfindel's like, no one ever falls off this horse. It's not possible.
Yeah.
So even this like asleep Frodo, basically, and he's like going in and out of it, and the horse is so beastly that Frodo does not fall off.
And this kind of touches a little bit on a point we had made earlier about the way Frodo lunged at the ring wraiths.
He was a little more brave.
A little more courageous
than
maybe he's portrayed in the movie. But the horse turns back around and faces, kind of like Arwen does in the movie, and shouts back at them, but it's Frodo the one doing it.
Yeah.
He's like, go back to the shadow. He's trying to command them to leave, and they're like laughing at him.
They're laughing at him.
Yeah.
That's right. You know what? He does fall off the horse eventually, doesn't he?
Yeah, he slips off.
Even in the book.
Off at the end, yes.
Okay, that horse, Glorfindel was wrong, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway, the only reason I bring that up is because it had been brought to my attention before we even started doing this by Doomnik Guy. Could you touch on some of the differences in how Frodo's portrayed in the movie and the books? And I'm starting to see it now. I think the big difference is, one, he came off as being older, wiser, knowing more about the world than other hobbits did.
True.
And being a little bit more courageous, willing to like fight than in the movie, where he kind of, as it goes further in the next two, he just becomes kind of like a weaker and weaker character.
He does, and it's to show the burden of the ring that's taking a toll on his life and his body, but at the same time it does kind of betray a little bit of his character from the book. That's a good thing to bring up.
I do think that's a valid criticism, I guess, but we'll talk about more on that probably later. So Rivendell.
So he wakes up. It's October the 24th, if you'd like to know. In the house of Rivendell.
Yeah. So we had talked about this, but I don't know if it got recorded last week.
None of this stuff did.
Where we were like, he very much Frodo, has like a right to ask Gandalf, like, what happened?
I was delayed. And you see the scene as though Gandalf's now telling Frodo what happened.
But he's just thinking it.
He's just thinking it. And then Frodo's just like, Gandalf, hello, Gandalf. And then Gandalf's like, oh, I'm sorry. Sam has hardly left your side.
Yeah.
And then it's like, wait, you didn't tell him?
Yeah.
Now, in the books, he sort of gives Frodo a little bit, but then he says, I'll tell you the rest at the dinner, right?
When they actually go to the council itself, Gandalf explains his entire... Because the way that Elrond sets up the council in the novel is we're going to tell the whole story of this ring from beginning to end, and I'm going to pass it to different people who will tell you different parts.
Yes.
I'm going to start because
cool.
Because I was there. Right?
Yes. I was there on that day,
ago.
the day the strength of men failed.
Yeah, so he was there like when the rings were made. He was there like from the beginning. So he explains all that lore, explains everything about Elendil and the whole fight that we saw as the like prologue of this film.
Isildur,
he explains all that in the Council of Elrond.
And then
says,
once the ring is lost, he's like, "Hey, now
I don't know. Now
I'm out.
I pass it to Bilbo, who can explain his part."
And Bilbo has to apologize, and he looks straight at Gloin, and he's like, So some of you have heard a different story.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm about to tell you all the real story.
The real way. Yeah, it's good stuff.
I love that part in the book.
So, for the sake of adapting this to a film, you got to get this info across and not burden one scene with everything.
Yeah.
Like you can do this in a novel, but the scene is so long.
This
whole chapter is just the Council of Elrond, and it's just a huge, long story of the history of this ring and how it got to where they're at.
So the movie put a lot of that in the prologue. It put a lot of that in their discussion, the shadow of the past, and then a lot of it here, and some of it will even be revealed later.
Yeah.
And so I liked it. Yeah, I liked the way that they spread it out in the movies.
I think they did a good job of breaking up that information, spreading it throughout the film, and you basically get all the same thing. You know what happens to Gandalf as the viewer of the movie. You know what happened, everything that explained in the novel in one chapter. You know all that information is just kind of broken up, and I think that was the right thing to do for a film.
I would totally agree with that. But as Gandalf explains where he had been, right? We do see that scene with him and Sauron, where Saruman, where Saruman is like force pushing him off the building, but his feet is it his heel or his tiptoes? It's like barely hanging on.
I thought that was cool.
Flips him back over. That was super cool. But of course, embrace the power of the ring. But Gandalf informs Saruman that there is only one Lord of the Rings and he does not share power.
Yep.
And this is so funny because you don't get this from the movie, but you do get this from the book. Because in the movie, it's like, what is Saruman doing? This isn't gonna work, right? But as we already mentioned before in the book, Saruman isn't just giving in to Sauron.
No.
That's the way it seems in the movie. He's just like, oh, okay, Sauron's my new boss, and come on, guys, like, don't be stupid. He's the new boss. Like, just do what he says. What Saruman is intending to do this whole time is to subvert Sauron from within, right?
Right.
And Gandalf is saying, folly, you're not going to do that. Yeah. He's more powerful than you. You're just going to lose. Yeah. And Saruman is like, oh, I'm powerful. I'm Saruman of many colors. I can defeat Sauron. It's a matter of cunning and wit. And it's not. And Gandalf, when Gandalf says there's only one Lord of the Rings and he does not share power, Saruman is actually thinking, yeah, I'm going to be the Lord of the Rings because I'm going to get it. And you're right. I will not share power with Sauron, right? Yeah. I never really saw it that way until I saw it this time. But understanding from the book Saruman's intention with what he's doing in feigning allegiance to Sauron makes a lot more sense of the situation than I think the movies are capable of delivering on their own.
I think that's a good point. Yeah. He's not intending to really join forces or to serve him.
No.
He's wanting to supplant him.
Yes.
And so
he's just kind of being...
That line makes a little less sense because Saruman's not intending to have shared power from Sauron. He's intending to overthrow him. But
the line is really good.
It's really good.
It's really good in the movie.
Share power.
So then we're at Rivendell, which looks beautiful.
It's great.
This is such a cool set.
I love that they got those two artists who had been classical Tolkien painters.
Alan Lee and Ted Naismith, I think.
Alan Lee and...
Is Naismith wrong?
I don't think it was him for the films, but I think he was a Tolkien painter.
Yeah.
But the other guy they got, I forget his name right now. Anyway, these guys had done many paintings for, I think for covers of the different versions of the books that had been released throughout the years and things like that. So I love that they went to them to sort of visualize and conceptualize.
John Howe.
That's
John Howe, Alan Lee, and Ted Naismith did do some stuff as well.
Okay.
But I think we were thinking of John Howe.
Yeah, John Howe is the one I was thinking of. But they just did a brilliant job of
so good.
Visualizing these locations and everything.
Yes.
Rivendell is really great. In the behind the scenes of the movie, they show how they made the waterfalls in the model.
Yeah,
they poured salt,
which
I
think George Lucas did a similar thing with episode 1 with
it was really cool.
the Gungan city. Yeah,
And it's genius. And the way a lot of it is just matte paintings.
Yes.
And you don't know that you're just seeing a matte painting.
Yes.
You think it looks like legit and 3D and it has depth. But it's just a flat image in the background. But it blends so well. They did such a good job. And this was one of the first movies to do that really well.
Yeah.
But one of the critiques that I have heard other people make of the movies and their portrayal of Rivendell is that it doesn't seem like
homely house.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like the last homely house.
Yeah.
It seems like, well, one thing that I actually kind of like about this, because I think this may have been intentional to some degree from Tolkien, but it kind of looks like a church.
Yeah, that's true.
What it really feels like, though, is a museum.
Yeah.
And especially where they got the shards of Narsil on display and all the statues. And that feels like a museum exhibit, right? Go see the Narsil exhibit. Okay. And Boromir's like, oh, let's check it out. That makes it feel very museum-y and not like a homely house. This is not a place that people live in. Yeah. But I don't actually care much about that because I think they did such a good job. I took some notes here about, this is something that's in the Lord of the Rings. Elrond's house is a place where all things are remembered. And that's a line.
Yes.
And then in Tolkien's letters, he talks about how Elrond symbolizes the lore and that his house symbolizes memory and preservation and the good and the beautiful and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, it totally works.
I think this set and presentation do such a good job with that. And I get it that preserving memory is typically, that's just a museum. Like you talk about an institution that's a building that aids in the preservation of memory, you're talking about a museum.
Yeah.
And so portraying Elrond's house like this, I had no problems with at all.
Yeah.
And memory, of course, being a big theme of not just the books, but these movies.
Yeah.
Right? The way that memory, not necessarily the way it technically works, but the way that it functions, maybe more mythologically, maybe more the way that memory kind of ties you to a home or to a place, right?
Right.
And the way that memories can fade.
Yeah.
And the way that new memories can be incorporated into it. Memory is such a big theme here in the movies.
Yeah. I was actually surprised in this reading of the novel that it wasn't Elrond who had kept the shards of Narsil, but Aragorn himself. And had carried it with him.
And he always had it. It was just the broken sword.
He just showed the broken sword to Frodo when he first met him, basically.
That's totally right. He's like, here you go. And it's like cut and it's a half sword.
I think it works, again, to put it here for the reason you're talking about. It's like they made Aragorn a little bit less or a little more hesitant in the movies.
Yeah, he's more reluctant in the
to accept his role. Yeah. Like, I don't think I can do that. I'm Elendil's heir. And then Arwen tries to talk to him. Is like, well, you're not
Elendil himself.
Not Elendil.
Or Isildur.
Isildur himself.
Yes.
They gave him more doubt in the movie where he had basically already accepted who he was.
In the movie.
His whole plan was to go to Gondor with Boromir and bring the sword back with him.
Yeah,
it was reforged here.
Right.
Before the 9 companions leave.
Right.
Rather than brought to him by
Elrond
later.
Yeah, I never really liked that in the movies.
Yeah. But anyway. But having it here is like the perfect place for that relic to be kept.
I actually have I have a good line here about Boromir, right? Because Boromir shows up, right? And he's like, oh, the still shop, that scene, right? He shows up and he goes in and he's at the museum and he sees some dude there and he's just like, hey, what's up? And then he runs his finger along the blade and it cuts himself, right? And he was not expecting that.
Yes.
So the shard of Narsil still being sharp is, it can be read as a narrative foreshadow to Strider himself. Right?
Well, kind of like the Ethellus, like we talked about last time.
Yes, exactly. The Kingsfoil,
yeah,
exactly.
It's a similar thing.
It's still found, but it's in the wild now.
Yeah.
It's not cultivated domestically.
People forgot its true purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the same thing here. So Boromir fancies wielding the sword. He holds it up, though he looks at Aragorn, and something he sees in Aragorn gives him great discomfort. He can kind of see it here. Like, you were a man in a house of elves? Oh, we're here on common purpose, I guess. But, really, he's kind of unsettled by it. Like, what are you doing here?
Yes.
You don't belong here. So Boromir then sees the heirloom of the kings is still sharp, and he realizes that the heir of the kings is still out there. Yeah. The lineage is still sharp, still able to cut, still able to fulfill its latent purpose. So he sees that the sword will cut again, and that its use, while greatly diminished, has not entirely faded. Yeah. The line to whom the heirloom belongs has greatly diminished, but it has not entirely faded either. Boromir then has no choice but to drop the heirloom and walk away and disrespect it. Because I was bugged by this. Like, why does he drop it
and then not pick it up?
But it's still sharp. That's why he drops it.
Yeah.
It's this. He has this dawning, this realization. The sword is still able to cut.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
This does not bode well for my father or for me
right.
or for for my purposes, right? My whole purpose of being here.
Mm-hmm.
So Boromir has no choice but to walk away and disrespect it because he does not want to accept it. As he says later, Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king. Yeah. We don't need this sword. This thing is stupid now that I know that it's sharp and can still cut. I think it's stupid now, and I'm the king. I'm the steward's son, you know?
Yeah.
So the fact that his blood was what the sword drew makes it all the much worse. His blood is not royal, and the sword revealed his blood for what it is. Yeah. It's not royal. The royalty cut his unroyal fingers, you know? And you could say that a sword that cuts its own master is... Tolkien does this a lot, especially in like The Children of Hurin, for example. There's that sword. What's it called? What's Turin's sword?
Oh, the black sword.
It like talks to him, and it gets thirsty.
It wants... Because it was the Dark Elves, wasn't it?
I can't remember the name of it.
It like desires blood. Yeah.
And this is part of Tolkien's Legendarium, that the swords, the weapons, especially the great kingly weapons of old, they will respect their wielder depending on who their wielder is. Mm-hmm. But they can also betray their wielder, or they can turn on their own masters if they develop a mind of their own. Not a mind, but a will of their own, something like that. So this sword that Boromir's the son of the steward, he's the prince, right? Mm-hmm. He should be rightfully allowed to wield this weapon, but it cut him. The weapon betrayed him, right? Anyways, it reminds me of Turin.
You're not the one.
Yep, he's not the master. You're not the master. Is out there. It's not you.
Yeah.
Yet then he looks and sees someone watching him after he does that.
Well, the one watching him is the one
Aragorn.
Aragorn is described as making people uncomfortable just by looking at them.
He's taller and he has that gaze. You're right. You might even call it a piercing gaze. Yeah.
And he can't hold gaze with Aragorn. He gets uncomfortable and turns away from him, right?
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
So the scene is amazing.
Yeah, it's really good.
After a deeper analysis, it says way more than I ever gave it credit for beforehand.
Yeah. And I have a couple thoughts on this too. One, there are I think it works. I think both versions of how Boromir is portrayed in the book and movie work. I'm not saying one's more valid than the other. They're just kind of like different approaches that more or less lead to the same end. Boromir is not portrayed right away with the sort of foreshadowing that he is in the film.
Yeah.
In the film, he comes across as being somebody who's he's very aggressive right away with Aragorn and the Council of Elrond.
Yeah, he's
Gondor
haughty.
Needs no king. Gondor,
I don't think he said that.
He doesn't say that in the book.
That comes later at the end of the Fellowship when he's talking to Frodo.
Yes.
And he's like, "Hey," some of those lines come in later.
Yes, and he's portrayed as being a more valiant man than maybe he comes across early on in the film. Of course, they sort of turn that around in the end anyway, so it leads to the same end. But I like that they do that this way in the movie.
Me too.
For all the reasons that you just said, but also it just kind of like it. How do I describe this? Like, I liked Boromir and Faramir in the book better as characters. I was more endeared to them. You kind of right away get this feeling, I don't really like this guy in the movie.
You do.
But I like that they take that and then you come around on him and you really love him by the end. So there's a nice turn of the character there.
Actually, that's a good point.
That is really satisfying too.
Yeah.
So that's why I think they both work.
I agree.
But I do think it's, and you mentioned this in the part that didn't get recorded last time, you miss out a little bit on the fact that Boromir is a bit of a visionary. Like,
yes, that's true.
It's mentioned that Faramir saw the dream first.
That's right.
But Boromir also saw it later,
Yeah.
the dream of the cloud and the darkness coming and the foreboding, and that he was then, Faramir wanted to go, but then he took it upon himself to take the journey. He wasn't summoned there by Elrond.
We talked about that,
Yeah.
It was a chance. This was a chance meeting that Legolas, Gimli, Aragorn, Gandalf, and that everyone was here all at once when the ring showed up.
The movie gives the impression that Elrond summoned these people to a council.
Yes.
And in the book, that's not what happened. They all just kind of came in almost a twist of fate.
Yes, chance. Yep, chance brought them there.
And this kind of goes back to that line.
We talked about this earlier.
With Gandalf, where he says, you were meant to have this ring, and that can be a comforting thought.
There are greater powers than good or evil.
Yes, there's a greater power out there than Sauron.
Yes,
who is involved in things going the way they're going. And that power also brought these people together at this specific time. Elrond wasn't the mastermind behind that happening.
Yeah,
they came there on other business
and
happened to be in the right place at the right time.
And isn't that a curious thing?
Yes.
Right.
And you get that a little bit stronger in the novel.
That's the eucatastrophe. I shouldn't have said there are greater powers than good or evil. I don't think that's quite what Gandalf said.
He says there's greater power than the ring or than Sauron, like the dark power.
Because I would probably say Tolkien intended Iluvatar to be good.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So it's not greater than good or evil.
Yeah. But anyway,
that's right. Yeah, they all showed up because in the books, Legolas only showed up because Gollum escaped. He's like, I got to tell him freaking Gollum
I have
escaped.
to go explain that Gollum got away.
And then
Glóin and Gimli's on there because Glóin is there, who was one of the dwarves in The Hobbit who went on that journey.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
and they're here to visit, and also they're concerned about Moria. And
they came to give basically a report that we've had a messenger from Mordor come.
Right, that's
who told us to give. That he would give us one of our dwarven rings back if we found this trifling thing that it's just something interesting to the Dark Lord. Pay no heed. I'm told that you know who might have this. Tell me who he is and where he's at.
And it's Bilbo.
Yes,
and also, if you don't do this, there was a threat associated with it. If you don't cooperate, the powers of Mordor are going to pour out upon your borders.
Yes,
and you will not be able to contain it.
Right.
Yeah. That was crazy.
So anyway, they were all there because they're troubled by this, and they're just coming to Elrond for advice.
Yep. He is known.
What should we do?
Elrond the Half-Elven is the wisest, I guess. Now, I would say that in many ways, Galadriel shows perhaps a greater amount of wisdom than Elrond. However, Galadriel has that mystique, this aura around her that is people are scared of her.
Well, she's
so it's like go to Elrond, man. Galadriel you might never make it out of that.
She comes from the Noldor, and the Noldor have a lot of pride. That's kind of their downfall.
That's right.
And so I think Elrond is considered a little bit more than her because first of all,
half elven. So if you're like, he's not like a total crazy elf. He's like he's a good middle point for the elves and men to both approach. He's very approachable.
Good point.
Yeah.
And, they're very secretive in Lothlorien, and there's a whole thing behind that I'm really going to dive into more.
Oh, I'm excited about that.
Later.
Yeah.
But she's of the Noldor, and if you've read or even heard of the Silmarillion, I mean, the things that the Noldor did, they are outcasts and banished here. On a for a reason.
Yeah, it's not just that they're here and have to go west and they're dragging their feet. It's like no,
they don't want to.
They don't want to go back. They I'd love to talk about the Silmarillion on this one day, but
anyway.
So I have this note here though that we kind of skipped over. Seeing Bilbo again is the best indication that it's been 17 years.
Yes.
In this whole movie.
Yes.
Right, because it feels like this has only been a couple weeks, right? Bilbo left, and then the ring came, and Gandalf left, but now Frodo had to go, and then Strider, and then it's only been a few weeks, and here we are at Rivendell. But why does Bilbo look so incredibly old? He's got white hair now; it's really very thin. Yeah. He's looking a lot more aged, and that's the best indicator that it has been 17 years.
Yeah,
because Peter Jackson otherwise does not give a hint at all that it's been anything near that amount of time.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's true. I also loved there's a difference between the scene where he kind of like he wants to see the ring again.
Yes.
I thought this was an interesting difference. Again, really feel like it works in the film version too. But they're all basically. He was like writing a song, which is amazing. The poetry of the song that Bilbo writes in the novel
The Tale of Tenuvia.
I think my favorite part of the reread of on this time of reading the book.
It was around that time for me as well. My favorite.
Like it's so good. Anyway,
which is hilarious because Aragorn's kind of like, dude, you're not a great poet like the elves, and what boldness or what like you had a lot of guts to like tell the elves their own story about Beren and Luthien, right?
To write
Bilbo's
poetry
like,
in the House of Elrond.
Yeah, so what? I'm doing my best.
Lore.
Yeah,
and they actually like it.
But it's such a good poem, though.
Yeah, it's actually legit. Like Bilbo is legitimately a good writer, like a really good writer in the novel. But anyway. My point is, they were kind of in this place where people gather to sing, and it's like socialize and tell stories. Like there were a lot of people around when Bilbo asked to see the ring. Gandalf was there, like a bunch of people were there, and like the whole room goes silent when this happens. Right, but in the movie they make it more private.
It's more private, and it's more of a jump scare. In the books, Frodo just sees that he turns into like a wrinkly little creature briefly in his eyes, just almost a vision, almost a hallucination on Frodo's part. But in the movie, they
make it more literal,
make it a jump scare. He's turning into this monster.
Yeah, the way I interpreted it in the novel was more the ring was resisting. Like Frodo was getting this feeling like he's seeing Bilbo as this disgusting creature and repulsed by him because he's asking to see it. Not because Bilbo actually reached out at him and tried to take it.
Yeah.
Although there probably was a little bit. There was just this moment shared between them where it just got dark for a second.
Yep. But, and all the elves could
Frodo
feel it,
was clutching to it like, don't you dare, you disgusting, horrible thing, come near my ring.
Yep.
But yeah, they made it more literal. This is actually a part that really freaked my little brother out the first time we watched it.
It might be the scariest part of the whole movie.
It traumatized him bad. Like
really?
He couldn't watch the scene for a while. It was a little too scary for a kid his age at the time. But anyway, interesting difference between the way that those are portrayed.
Very interesting. But I think
both
how it,
versions work.
I think so too, and especially because then Bilbo, he kind of tears up a bit, and he's like, "I'm sorry about." All this is all my fault, you know, and I put this upon you, and now there's nothing for it. Like, you have to be the one to go die in Mordor. Bilbo's feeling horribly responsible. And on top of that, he's like, still secretly wants the ring, and he feels ashamed of himself. And then Frodo comes and puts his hand on his shoulder, and it's like really touching scene. I really like that.
We had been talking about earlier in this particular series, what we feel like makes for a good adaptation. And I had talked about, even though there are major differences early on in the ride through the Shire, that it still gets to the same spirit of what's communicated there about you need to understand the culture of hobbits, right? So just returning to that point, I think the one thing that they did really well here that sort of is leading me to the direction I'm going in my sort of interpretation of the theme of these stories. Frodo says to Bilbo, "I'm not like you, Bilbo."
Right. Like, I never knew what to make of that.
I didn't. When I was younger. I don't like going on adventures.
Yeah.
I idolized you growing up, and I love all the lore that you taught me and all the stories you told. But I don't actually want to go on adventures like you did.
And when I do, I'm like dying before I even get to Rivendell. Like my adventure is way more dangerous than
I want to go home now.
Yes.
I don't want to keep going anymore. I'm done. I'm not like you. I think that's really important to note because Frodo is taken by the ring in the scheme of things much faster than Bilbo was.
Oh, it's true.
Like Bilbo had it for 60 freaking years.
Yeah.
And was able to let go of it in the end. And Frodo had it for, I don't know, a year and a half. Well, no, he had it for.
It was in his possession for 17 years.
But he didn't. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So it wasn't. It was a long time. That's true.
It was a while, but
it wasn't 60 years.
No.
And he was only really carrying it on him from the time he left, really, because it was in like a chest the whole time.
Yeah, he kept it away.
Anyways, the point is, it took him faster.
Right.
And I think that comes down to the adventurous spirit, the willingness to go out versus the desire to sort of stay
in,
sheltered, to avoid doing the hard things is a big part of like what Tolkien is getting at.
Yeah,
what's important.
I think so.
Right.
I think that in The Hobbit, Bilbo didn't want to leave for his own reasons, right? But he ends up leaving on his own pretty quickly because he's got that adventurous spirit, right? Whereas in The Lord of the Rings, Frodo's a lot more reluctant to leave. So or Bilbo, I should put it this way, Bilbo's kind of annoyed with all the other hobbits in Hobbiton, right? And they do a pretty good job of showing that in the movies. Yeah. Bilbo's like, anyways, I don't want to say he looks down on him, but he's not like them at all.
Yeah.
And Frodo is more like them, though. So Bilbo kind of wanted to leave secretly, and Gandalf could see that in him.
Yes,
like, you want to leave.
Yes,
you don't want to stay here. You want to trade a walking stick for a sword,
yes.
right? I know you do. Whereas Frodo never did.
Never.
But I think that connection that Frodo has to the Shire is maybe what makes him better suited to do this particular task than Bilbo.
Yes.
Because he is fighting for the Shire. Whereas Bilbo, he liked the Shire. It's nice, but he kind of, and even as he gets older, he's like, I want to see mountains. I want to leave. I don't like it here that much.
Yes.
Whereas Frodo's like, I want to live here forever and never leave. But Frodo's love and connection for his roots, for the Shire, for his home, for his friends, his family, that is what really drives him and all the hobbits. As we see that later with Merry and Pippin and Treebeard, right? Where it's like, there won't be a Shire. Like, we've got to do this so that we can save our home. Mm. And then Sam and Frodo at the end of Return of the King talking about how just imagine going back home, and as soon as somebody's like, there won't be a return journey, it's like, don't say that. The whole reason we're doing this is to save the Shire. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And don't forget, you can save it, and we're going to go back there, right?
Yeah, right.
And it's really good because that's something that Bilbo didn't have as much. And that really is what drives Frodo in the end.
Yeah.
Is like, I have to do this for the Shire. And it's because he was so in love with the Shire, which Bilbo just wasn't as much.
I think that an interesting point branching off of that is another difference. Bilbo was at the Council of Elrond in the novel.
Oh, yeah.
And he wasn't.
I think he volunteers to take the ring, too.
He's the one who jumps up first.
He's like, all right, I'll do it.
I guess this whole business started with me, and I might as well end it. And
like, if you weren't 130, maybe.
Like, first of all, you're freaking old. Second of all, I don't think that you're suited for this for other reasons. But third of all, it didn't start with you. That's the whole reason we had this meeting, was so that it could describe how much further it came before you. So no, it's not your responsibility to do this. Anyway, it's just funny.
Well, and there's a line around here, too, where it says, Bilbo and Gandalf both agreed that Frodo was the best hobbit in the Shire.
Yes.
I don't know what that means. What does it mean to be the best hobbit? But either way, they both agreed that were the hobbits to show greater resilience to the ring than other races. Of all the hobbits, Frodo's the best one.
Yeah.
It's got to be him. It had to be him the whole time.
Yeah.
And that's his, I always imagined I was with you,
yes.
When I was in the Shire, I imagined I was off. But now that I'm off, I wish I was back.
Yes.
But that's almost the conundrum of life almost. That's almost the, you can't just stay at home. This actually reminds me of that poem where it's like, it's a dangerous business going out your door, right?
Yeah.
It is dangerous, but that doesn't mean you don't do it.
Yeah.
You do it. You have to go out there. But as soon as you're out there, don't forget where you came from.
Yes.
Right? You've got to be grounded with roots, but you can't stay at the roots. You're not a tree. Right? You're a person. Yeah. And people go out on the roads and face danger, and then they remember their home, and then they come back, right?
It's also,
and that's Frodo. It sounds a bit of a, you can't ever live in the present, because when you're at home, you wish you were somewhere else. When you're somewhere else, you wish you were at home. Yeah. But there's a tension between those two that you can't just forget or leave one or the other.
Yeah.
You can't just be a forever adventurer, right?
Yeah.
You have to, even Gandalf has a purpose that he's remembering in all of his wanderings that is tying him, that's grounding him, so that he never loses sight of what he's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Whereas Saruman shuts himself in his new home, he forgets about his purpose.
Yeah. There's also something about somebody who wants no part of all of this stuff being, like you said, the ideal candidate to resist the power or the call of the ring.
Yeah.
Somebody else who...
So the fact that Bilbo even volunteered is like, hey, you just ruled yourself out.
Probably not the right person.
Probably not.
Yeah.
And that's politics, that's king, that's... The best kings in history are the ones that were reluctant
or didn't really want the power.
Yeah. And probably true of presidents, although you have to run for president in America, so
which means
they all wanted it. So anyways, we don't have a good example here, except maybe Washington, right?
I guess so. Anyway, so the Council of Elrond itself, trying to think what we should touch on as far as that scene goes. I mean, there's kind of a lot of things they set up here. Bring forth the ring, he sets it there. They try to break it Gimli tries to like smash it with his axe, and nope, nothing, no weapon we here possess can destroy this thing. Yep. It has to be taken to the mountain and thrown in the fire.
The mountain of fire. And this is one of the things I have, that there it was made, and only there can it be unmade. Right? What an interesting fate for the ring. Like if you just think of the ring itself, right? The ring was made by fire, but that same fire can also destroy it. Because at least in part, the fire, well, I don't know whether I should touch on that, but there's a good fire and a good use of it. The enemy fears this as well. The good use, the flame imperishable, you could call it. Yep. Like the spark of divinity of the free peoples of the world, right?
The secret fire of Tolkien's lore.
Exactly. Yeah. But the ring, master of all, can be destroyed by natural fire from a mountain. But the ring was forged in fire to bend the flame imperishable to its own will. Yeah. Yet that very same fire, well, I don't say very same, but that flame is its own undoing, right? That this is kind of funny, actually, when you talk about like being connected to your home and then having to go off on an adventure. The ring can't go home. Home is where the ring dies. The ring, and you could say home was with Sauron, but that's not where it was made. Its mother, you could say, is the earth. It's the volcano. It's the lava. That's where it came from, right? But it can't ever go back. It has to always stay out for its own survival.
Yeah,
right? It can never go back home. So it can't be tied to anything necessarily, right? It's just opportunistically doing whatever seems good in the moment as it goes, and eventually, drives its own demise. But anyways, I thought that was interesting enough to take note on.
Yeah, for sure. See, now I'm getting confused because I read the novel version most recently, so I'm trying to remember what was not in the movie. But was in the novel version of this council.
I've got notes here. First off, just about Aragorn in the museum with the shards of Narsil and Boromir dropping the handle. There's the line with, the same blood flows through my veins, the same weakness, right? Yeah. Aragorn is holding to the past, which grounds him, but it's keeping him from action because his past is a lineage that failed once.
Yes, right.
And so as much as he is in body, he's a wanderer in the wilderness. But his spirit is like shut inside of the tabernacle of, his body, right? It's like we can't escape our fate because our great-great-grandpa did a bad thing. We are his kid, and that's who we are.
Same blood.
But he's being too much at home. You almost have that opposite problem here, where it's like almost Frodo's problem, I guess. But he is so identified with his family and with his home and that kind of stuff that it keeps him from acting because he's so connected to those things. But those things weren't perfect. Those things kind of screwed up, right? Yeah. And so he's afraid, and his reverence for the past has turned into something of a paralyzing fear. This is what we had referenced earlier, right, in other episodes, the tension between respect for the past and searching out a new path for the future, the more conservative and the more liberal tendencies, right? Yeah. So that's the line. Oh, yeah. Then there's this wonderful line about when Aragorn and Arwen first met, where he says, "I thought I strayed into a dream."
Yeah.
But in the books, he's singing the Lay of Luthien.
Right.
And elves have this power to like make things manifest in a way. Like they sing a song and it's almost as if you can see the vision of the thing that's being sung about. Frodo experiences this to some extent in Rivendell.
It's almost
it's my favorite part of the book.
Microcosm of the great music.
Yes. Of the music of reality.
They have a similar sort of ability to sort of foresee and tell in music things.
So cool. Yeah. But when Aragorn sings the song, he thought that for a moment he was using the elvish power because as soon as he saw Arwen, he thought it was Luthien. Yeah. Right? He was just like, whoa. And the way this says it, I thought I had strayed into a dream. And how cool that is when you go back to our previous episode about when Frodo first sees Arwen and how she looks.
Yeah.
It looks as though you strayed into a dream, right? And that's just that when people, and they do talk about this in the book, when Bilbo and Frodo first see Arwen at the dinner, it's like, she is a sight to behold. Yeah, like it is a treat to even be near her. And she has that kind of presence, you feel like you're in a dream. Okay, now I'm at the council. Okay. So at the council in the movie, Boromir says that he had a dream where the sky was dark, but a pale light lingered in the western sky. That's a sunset, by the way. And the pale light, the light is their hopes were fading, right?
Yeah. Sun is setting on the past age.
Yeah. And they're all talking about the ring and stuff, and Boromir's like, hey, we could use it. Yeah. And that's when Gandalf's like, "Oh, it's not game but took," and he does like the whole
that was really crazy. They make it a lot freakier.
Yeah, it's like an earthquake
in the movie version.
Yeah,
He does do this in the novel, but it's not like
and it's like a shadow
as a response to like scare Boromir or something
right.
like that. It's more just in the flow of his story.
But then Elrond is like, never have those words been uttered in the Valley of Imladris.
Yeah.
And Gandalf, this is so interesting because Gandalf is the kind of person, he goes around and he kind of breaks people's rules, right? Yeah. If people have rules, he'll respect them to an extent, but when he wants to, if he feels that this is going to be of use, he doesn't care about your rules. He doesn't care about your like the Pharisee kind of like, hedges and rules and stuff. He's going to do what he wants because he knows his purpose, right?
Well, I like I think it's in the novel, he responds to that by saying, well, I hope it's not, I hope it doesn't become the spoken language of,
yes.
Where are we at? Rivendell.
Yeah, in Rivendell.
At some point, but like you better get used to it if we don't like do something.
That's true. So he gives them a taste of the future. Yeah. It's almost like he's bringing the future to them because at least in part, Elrond, a lot of them are hesitant to really do anything with the ring. And Gandalf is like, look, I'm going to take what I know about the future and that it's coming too. I'm going to bring it here right now so that you can experience it briefly. And then we're going to make our decision. Do we want that? Is that what we want here? But the concept of not hearing certain words spoken in certain places, it's very interesting. Obviously, there's like Tolkien, like Catholic.
That happens a lot.
There.
Like even
a lot in Lord of the Rings.
In the novels, when Aragorn's on the road and they'll
do not
say
speak of it here.
Don't say that here. Don't stop saying those things.
Yes, or it's nighttime. Speak of such things in the day, right? Don't speak of it at night. And,
that happens a lot.
It's really cool. It sounds superstitious, but there is something to it. Speaking is invocational, right? Words have power. And benediction or malediction, those two words right there. So benediction is to bene, meaning good, and dict, to speak, right? Yeah. So to speak well is to bless, right? To benedict. Yeah. But to maledict is to speak poorly, right? But you're always either blessing or cursing whenever you speak. Like all of your words affect other people in ways that are either good or bad, right? Yeah. So speak good or speak evil. Rivendell is a place of blessing. It's a place of benediction. It is a sacred place. Part of what makes it sacred is that the maledictions are not uttered there. That's what makes it a sacred place. But Gandalf breaks this taboo only for the gravest of purposes. He allows the darkness of malediction to remind the people in blissful Imladris of the evils that exist outside the world. Yeah. So Gandalf is reminding them that the power of the ring is altogether evil and that there is no good use for it. Yep. Because even
Boromir
just reading it
suggested, why don't we use it?
Yeah.
Like we're talking about destroying this or hiding it or whatever. Like, why are we not even considering using this thing?
And I do feel, especially after reading The Fellowship and reading the end there, because a lot of what he says here, he says to Frodo at the end of The Fellowship as he's trying to reason and trying to get Frodo to go to Minas Tirith. Boromir, I actually do feel for him, right? Yeah. His people are dying. By our blood is your land kept safe, that whole thing. But the way he's doing it is not right, obviously. But the way he sees the ring is a gift from Prometheus, is what he sees. Right. He sees the fire and the way that the ring can control fire, even the flame imperishable, to get people to take over people's wills, right? And he sees that as a gift, right? And that's the story of Prometheus, essentially. But anyways, Prometheus is funny because the way, even in the Greek myths, he's not always like just a good guy.
Yes, right.
He also did really screwed up really bad stuff. But the ring only answers to pure evil, and that's the one thing that Boromir's missing, right? Yeah. And this is around the time where Boromir is like, what would a ranger know of this? Because Aragorn's like, did you not hear it? The ring doesn't serve other people, just the Dark Lord. And this is where Legolas says, this is Isildur's heir. Because Boromir's like, what do you know about this?
Yeah.
But he said, what I don't like from the movie, and I don't know, I don't think this is in the book. Maybe it is. But he says, what would a ranger know of this? But does he not know what rangers are? Even the rangers of Ithilien.
He doesn't. Basically, it doesn't go the same way in the novel. But he says, basically, we're the ones keeping all your land safe. Right. And he's like, and Aragorn speaks up.
That's right.
And he's like,
there are threats from the north as well.
Listen, they don't treat us the same way. Right. And a big fat guy in freaking Bree like calls me Strider and has all these names, and he doesn't realize that 10 hours march or a day's march away is the type of creature that would like curdle his blood and like
Right.
and those people are kept safe by us,
Right.
like because we're out there fighting it in the north. So you're not the
Right.
only one
Yeah.
who's defending all these lands up in the north. It's actually us too.
I guess that makes sense. The
Yeah.
messengers of Gondor do not often come
No.
up north.
No.
At least not anymore.
No.
There may have been a time where they did.
So I mean, it is still both kingdoms, the Arnor and Gondor, but what the remnants of Arnor are still keeping the north safe,
Yeah.
and Gondor's keeping the south safe.
Right.
So that's what the kind of the point he was trying to make. And
So
he's a
then-
lot more forward about who he is in the novel. He's like, no, I am.
Yeah, it's not Legolas.
This is the freaking sword, by the way.
Yeah, here you
I'm
go.
thinking it's about time.
I carry it all the time.
That I come to Gondor and
Yeah.
and come with you there and reclaim my kingship.
You know, in the books, Boromir is hesitant. He is reluctant. He is not excited about the new king showing up and dethroning his father. But he's not as against it as he is
Yes.
here in the movie.
Yes.
In the movie, he's like, Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king.
He doesn't say that in the novel.
Right. No, he does not. In fact, he says, well, I don't know if I believe that you're really the king, but if
Yeah.
you are, please come down. We need
Yeah.
help.
We need that sword.
Yeah, we need
really
that
bad.
sword. And if you're the king is a healer and all the reasons, right?
Yeah.
Boromir is okay with Aragorn. He's just skeptical that Aragorn's who he says,
he says he is,
which is right. To be skeptical of something like that. But at least in the books here, Boromir, when he's at least in the movie here, when he says that Gondor has no king, Gondor needs no king, that is to the detriment of his own people. That if you're faced with the king of the rightful heir of your people, and you're like gonna deny it, but you're still seeking the power of the ring, right? It's like you're only doing that for self-preservation reasons.
Yes, right.
You're not actually concerned about your people because the people probably do need a king.
That's a good point.
They do have a king, and if this is the king, you're really wrong for withholding him from the proper seat of governance, right? And so it all works towards Boromir's end, I suppose, which he does redeem himself for
Yeah,
to some
right.
degree. But yeah, he seeks not only the good of his home, but the preservation of his royal family.
Yeah. And that's not so true
at all
of
costs.
the character in the novel as much.
No, not as much. Although they still both falter in the end, and I'm gonna talk about that later on.
Right.
But let's just say that Boromir, when Boromir isn't doing this, how would I put this? Boromir wants the ring to coerce other people, basically. He's not doing this out of love. He's not doing this out of respect or love for his home. He's doing this for basically just power. Yeah. And that's kind of, I think, the reason why he comes along with the group in general, and probably why he ends up just failing and trying to take the ring from Frodo. Because while he's connected to his home, once again, maybe a little too much, it's not really the people that he's concerned about. He's mostly just concerned about the stewardship and whatnot. Now, in the books, it's different, so we should probably just leave it there.
Yeah. Let's see. So
Gimli's kind of dumb in the movies.
yeah, he is.
It's endearing.
You know
but
what?
it's not in the books.
It's
He's a lot smarter in the
It's not only
books.
him, it's also Pippin that
Yeah.
they make a lot dumber in the movie.
Way dumber.
And I was kind of conflicted on this.
Yeah.
There's part of me, again, that thinks that some of these ways of sort of simplifying characters, like making Boromir very more obviously suspicious,
yeah.
is the right choice for a movie general audience. You kind of like point at it and be like, hey, you need to know these things. These are
Yeah.
what you need to know about these characters, rather than giving them a more sort of nuanced, I don't know, presentation. Like, yeah, Gimli is just relegated in the films to being comic relief.
Yeah.
And he's actually a really thoughtful character in
He
the
is.
novels.
He is.
Pippin is relegated to being, I mean, he's comic relief in the novel too, but
Right.
like to being basically as dumb as possible
As dumb as possible.
as comic relief in the film.
Yes.
And again, I think that simplifies it. It makes you remember that hobbit from that hobbit and this character from that
true.
character. You simplify their traits.
Yeah.
And I could see some people being like, "Oh, you're not really showing who the character is in the adaptation."
Not really.
But again, for a mass
it's
appeal
good. It's fine.
film that's trying to reach like a really general audience, this is a better way of doing it than say like when we did Arrival, where they have people just like blatantly, almost stupidly explaining for the sake of the audience things.
Yes, yes.
It's better than that.
Yeah.
But it's the same principle.
It's the same principle.
Yeah.
And I think Merry and Pippin were seen as maybe expendable characters. Not expendable in the sense that they can just die, but like they didn't change they changed Frodo a bit. They didn't change Sam very much for the movies.
No.
And that was good.
Yes.
They didn't change Frodo that much, other than to just make the burden of the ring really weaken him a lot.
He just feels younger and weaker.
And weaker.
Yeah.
But they took a lot of liberties with Merry and Pippin because, I don't know, with Merry even as well, he's like this party animal. Like, he's, in his own way, he's comic relief. But he's the only one that didn't attend the party at Bree from earlier on.
Yeah,
in
he
the
wasn't
books.
there. Yeah.
So it's like, it's not really right to portray him as that type of character. But, I think I agree with you that in the movies it works.
It works.
So I wouldn't complain too much about it.
Because you have less space.
Yeah.
To say what you need to say. And so you got to simplify certain elements. And I think for the film, it works. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But it always, every time I watch it, I feel conflicted when Merry and Pippin come running up at the end and they were like listening into the council the whole time. And they come running up. You need people of intelligence on this mission quest thing. Right.
That rules you out.
There's a very similar line in the novel, but they weren't there. They were told about this afterwards, and they're upset that they're going to be left behind. They're like, no, there's no way. We've come this far. We can't go back now. Right. Elrond wanted to send them back because to warn their people in whatever way they can to prepare themselves in case they get invaded.
That's right.
And he's like, someone needs to go back and tell the freaking Shire people that like there might be a war coming, and you should probably prepare for that. Yeah. But like, they're like, no, you can't.
Which was good foresight by Elrond, by the way.
Yeah, it's smart.
The scurrying of the Shire happens later on, and the hobbits were not prepared for that.
Exactly. So, but they're like, no, we have to go, and Gandalf sort of convinces them. But there's a similar line where it's like, you need a person of intelligence. You need people of intelligence on this quest. Yeah. And Gandalf comes in and is like, well, Gandalf. Then definitely not you, Peregrine Took or whatever.
So funny.
So the spirit of the line is still there, but it just comes across as like so much more stupid because he was there listening to the council and he was not really listening because he's like, where are we going? Now, the reason I'm conflicted about it is because, one, it makes him look way dumber than he was in the novel, but it gets a laugh every time.
It does. It really does.
When I'm watching this with family, friends, whatever, a more general audience, someone who hasn't read the book maybe, or it gets a laugh, a big laugh. It's the biggest laugh of the film every time.
Probably. And it's also his reaction.
Clearly it works.
Yeah. But Billy Boyd, the way Meriadoc says like, well, that rules you out. And Pippin at first smiles and nods. And then he like, that's almost the funniest part.
Yeah, right. Right. So anyway,
that's good stuff.
The 9 companions, it took a much longer time in the book for them to select who they wanted to.
Right. Elrond wanted to send Glorfindel or one of the high elves, to be a warrior. Yeah. And Gandalf kind of says, hey, look, friendship may prove as good a weapon as any in this quest.
Yeah.
But also, this is the last line I have before Frodo says that he'll take it. What happens when Sauron takes back what is his, as Boromir says. This is the inevitability of the situation. If the rings exist at all, if the ring exists at all, it'll be reclaimed one way or the other by Sauron. Either one will use it and Sauron will control them, or one will hide it and Sauron will find it. So destroying it is really the only actual way to go.
Yeah.
But the fact that it wasn't always clear what exactly was going to happen. In the books, it's a little bit less clear as to what the fate of the ring is going to be. Yeah. And that's why Boromir holds out hope. Oh, we can go to Minas Tirith, we can use it.
Yeah.
Whereas in the books, they make it pretty dang clear. Yeah. This is going to be destroyed.
In the movie, it's like, this thing has to be destroyed.
In the movie, it's,
Or we have to go straight to the Blackland now. Whereas there was a lot of different paths that they could have taken.
Oh, we can cover it later on, but there's at least 4, because they could have sailed around up the Umbar and up Anduin. They could have gone through the Gap Rohan. They have over the mountains. They could have gone through the mountains. So there's at least like 4 places there. And then I guess the boats would take too long. The Gap Rohan was being watched. The mountain laughed at them, and so they had to go. They had to go through the mines, which end up being collapsed, by the way, and no one can ever go through again.
But I mean, it wasn't even clear. They say maybe even Gandalf hadn't decided.
Yes, whether
they were going to go to Minas Tirith first
or Mordor
and like keep it there for a while.
Yeah.
Before they made a decision, okay, how are we going to try to get in there?
Right.
Like, it wasn't necessarily the plan. We're just marching straight to the freaking Blackland right now.
Yeah.
I think you're right. That's why Boromir was more on board with, or more hopeful.
Right, because he thought it could go to Minas Tirith.
We may end up there anyways. That's the probably the smartest thing to do is to take it to our place of strength. where it'd be the safest.
And Boromir keeps saying this later on, like, "Oh, we should never have come here. We should take the Gap of Rohan and then take the roads to my city."
Yeah.
But Elrond, it's clear from this council that, right, like, I don't know. Maybe it's not so clear that they won't go to Gondor, but it's clear that this ring is being destroyed.
Yeah.
And that's what Boromir does not want.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyways, Frodo will take it. You can see the statue that holds the shards of Narsil in the background. Like, this meeting is taking place like right next to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of cool.
I hadn't noticed that the first, 20 times I saw the movie. But then I saw it that one time. I was like, oh, well, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's sweet. And then, so the continuity of the space is really well done. Probably because they actually built the sets, right? Which they don't do anymore. And then there's a scene in the extended edition that is not in the theatrical release, but it's basically of Aragorn right before he's preparing to leave, and he's like clearing the mausoleum statue of his mother, right?
Yes, right.
And I can't remember.
This is probably something in the appendices, I would think.
Probably,
I don't remember because it's been too long since I've read them.
Took him to Rivendell and then died of wolves or something like that.
Yeah.
But this is, once again, he's identifying with the things that are really tearing him apart, that are keeping him anchored to the past, basically, and that are holding him back. This is important because in the extended version, he kind of rejects Arwen as well, because there's that scene where they say goodbye.
He gives the thing back to her, the pendant or whatever.
But you also get that farewell scene with Arwen where she's like not happy. I don't think is this in the theatrical version?
She's there.
Oh, she is
and
there.
He looks back, I think.
And she's like not happy.
No, you're right.
I'm pretty sure this is extended.
It's not in the theatrical.
Yeah, this
they
is
just kind of walk out and she's not there in the theatrical.
Yeah, so they show you a little bit more of the heartbreak here. He rejects Arwen because he doesn't feel worthy of the role he was born into. And in the books, Elrond tells him, like, hey, if you're not going to go be the king of Gondor, I'm not giving you my daughter, right?
Yeah,
you cannot marry her. I will stand against it for the rest of forever if you are just going to, like, pass on this whole thing.
Yeah.
And so Aragorn really is driven by, the privilege to be married to someone like Arwen in his quest here. You don't really pick up on that as much. Elrond just seems to be against it no matter what in the movies. But in the books, he's like, I'm all for it if you go be the king.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, don't waste my time.
You have to accomplish
you got to be
what you're meant to do.
Do some good. But this is funny. He wants to protect the past, but he's 87 years old. And they even mention this in The Two Towers. There's no stopping time, and he should probably have some kids and get this whole kingly lineage thing continued, because he's kind of just not moving. Yeah. He's not preserving his own lineage, and he's not seeking out the kingdom, right? So he's bowling a 7-10 split down the middle. I use that analogy all the time.
The midlife crisis of a person of his
because he lives to be 200
possible age. Yeah,
probably it's around the mid. Yeah.
Aragorn's midlife crisis at age 87.
But in wavering so much like he does in the movies, he's accomplishing neither. He is neither producing children. It ends with him. Like, he's got to make a decision, but he's just not doing it. Yeah. So Aragorn is truly the reluctant king, which is good, right? That those who deny power until it is hoisted upon them tend to be the best. Tolkien said this himself. This quote is great. The most improper job of any man, even saints, is bossing around other men. Not one in a million is fit for it, and least of all those who seek the opportunity.
Yeah, I love that line.
Aragorn is certainly not seeking the opportunity.
No, he's not.
So to the extent that there is some value in his hesitancy, that's where it lies, right there. Then we also have Bilbo in the ring. We already talked about that, though.
Yeah, where he gives him the mithril shirt.
Yeah.
Tells him to keep it a secret.
So as they leave, Elrond says, no oath nor bond is laid to go further than you will, right? And I love that they recorded, that they kept that in the movies, because in the books, it's so intense. Elrond is just like, you guys don't understand the horror you're about to face. It would be unethical for me to make you promise. Yeah, because there's no way I would want to hold you to an oath or a promise after the crap you're about to see. It's going to be awful.
And Gimli tries to say, but oaths may strengthen. In those times, he's like, but
you don't know what you're
trust me, bro.
Trust me, bro. Because Elrond's been there. He's been there, man. This is not going to be pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that. And there's no oath or bond, which it's so good, because once again, you get that theme that we've been talking about. We talk about it with the Nazgul and the way they treat animals, right? But it's an idea of free will versus subduing by force, right? Yeah. Elrond could easily have been like, all right, you take this oath and you signed you have to do it now. But no, he takes the path of free will, and I will not, if you don't want to do this, you do not have to.
Because it would break them if they got to that point where they had made an oath and then they break the oath. It would shatter them as a person.
Totally, because
he doesn't want to put them in a position to break them as people.
To go back on your word and to become dishonorable. That's a big deal, especially back in the day.
Yeah.
But also allowing the free will of free people to express itself in whatever way that it does is actually the way that these chance meetings tend to happen. The way that luck and fate and whatever Iluvatar's plan is for all of this stuff, it all plays out through, like the people who are just kind of able to make their own decisions, right? And of course, you're maybe led or nudged in one way or another by powers well beyond your control. But ultimately, it's your choice. Yeah. And I think Tolkien really puts a big emphasis on that. Yeah. There's no oath or bond.
I also like that they chose 9 to oppose the 9 riders.
To oppose the 9 riders, yeah.
But
seems to be a good number for.
There was this idea, like you're saying, we should send Glorfindel, we should send some more warriors.
Some warriors.
And Gandalf more or less sort of goes to bat for Merry and Pippin in this, in saying, listen, our only hope of success is in secrecy, anyways, not in weapons.
It's true.
So,
which is another hint, Boromir. We're not going to Minas Tirith.
Right. Like
your weapons will not help us.
We're not going to succeed here through fighting. So it's kind of pointless to send warriors anyway.
Yeah.
We have to send people that are good at hiding and staying secret.
Hobbits.
And
Yeah. And people who trust each other.
And people who would trust each other are way more important than warriors who may not have fought side by side before. Yeah.
Especially because the ring is so alluring and powerful that it was risky enough to bring Boromir at all. But to bring more people who don't have this trust, this connection, this deep friendship,
would be
the more of them, the more likelihood that things can go wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good place to leave off as they're leaving Rivendell.
Yep.
We'll get into Caradhras.
Caradhras, yeah.
Mines of Moria. Hopefully Lothlorien, and then end of the movie, just kind of 4 more sections, I guess, to get through. But
Lothlorien, did you call it Lothlorien?
I did not. I said Loth.
Tactics over.
Anyway, appreciate you guys again. Thank you so much. We'll be back again next month. Peace out.